record, which means you guys should have to do something on your end. And speaking of next week, don't forget, starting next week for the next 2 weeks, our hours switch up just a bit. And we go, instead of meeting from 9 to 1, we meet from 9 to 2. So that starts next Tuesday, Thursday. So please have this in your calendar if you don't already. So the next 2 weeks, we meet 9 to 2. Everybody good? Everybody have that? We'll have to eat lunch, won't we? On break. I will anyway. I do good to go to 1 without lunch. There's no way I can go to 2. If I start getting a little grumpy at 12:58, you know why. All right. So just that quick little reminder. Let's see. So we are in the throes of Unit 3. And just a quick recap. We actually are talking about Unit 3, remember, is all about encumbrances. And an encumbrance is just anything that affects title. So the various things that we're talking about in Unit 3, good morning. The various things that we're talking about in Unit 3 are those encumbrances that affect title. I'm not telling you they're good. I'm not telling you they're bad. They're just something that affects the title. And so we talked about some examples of some things that may encumber, some that may affect the title. So for example, we talked about our liens. I think a good way to remember a lien, when you see the word lien, why don't we just see the word loan? If you have a lien on the property, it's because you owe somebody some money. Maybe you didn't borrow it. And that's why I'm kind of using that with a twist. But if we see lien and we think, okay, loan, that means I owe somebody some money. So we talked about your mortgage. We talked about mechanics liens. We talked about specific liens and general liens. And then after liens, just kind of hit on a few things. I'll let you guys review that. But then the next big thing where we left off is we're in the throes of talking about easements. So on page 56, we introduce you to easements. And easements are just permission to be there. If somebody has an easement on your property, they don't have ownership. They don't have possession. They don't have anything. They just have permission to be there. And a couple different types of easements. The easement appurtenant. How many tracts of land affects the easement appurtenant? Anybody remember? Yep, good job. 2 and only 2. Never less, never more. Appurtenant easement is always 2 tracts of land. And what it is basically you have somebody that needs to come or go. They need to use your driveway to get off and on their property, for example. So that's our picture on page 56 of an appurtenant easement. One party is being used, another party is doing the using. And then the other type of easement that we talked about is an easement in gross. Maybe an easement in gross affects 1 tract of land, maybe it affects 2,000. An example of one that might affect 1 tract of land is our personal easement in gross. So maybe you have land with a pond and you have a buddy that wants permission, permanent permission to come fish on your pond. They don't want to call you every time they want to come fishing. They just want to be able to show up and go fishing whenever they want to. One option you two may have is to grant your friend a personal easement. You give them permission to come and access your pond. Now that doesn't mean they can come on your land and do whatever they want, whenever they want. Their easement, their permission is to come and go and fish on your pond. When you sell that property, when that property is no longer yours, that personal easement in gross dies. It does not convey. The other easement in gross that we talked about, probably the more common one that we see the most often is the commercial easement in gross. And that's how Duke Power has permission to run their poles and lines on your property. Who else? R&R Railroad. Anybody that has utilities or equipment would be our easement in gross, commercial easement in gross. Again, those do not convey automatically. So if Duke Power sells or shuts their doors, the new power company would have to acquire that easement. It would not happen automatically. Now they have a legal team that'll handle that for them as part of the process. But what you and I need to understand is the legal team needs to make it happen. It doesn't just happen automatically. Commercial or any easement in grosses do not convey automatically. So the pertinent easement does, the easement engrossed does not. Good morning. So where we left off, I went off book just for 1 second because I wanted to introduce you guys to some words that we're getting ready to see when we talk about easements. And we're going to see these words in Unit 9, we're going to see them in Unit 10, we're going to see them in Unit 8, 7. So we're going to see these words express versus implied on numerous occasions. So I thought it was important that we take a few minutes and make sure we're really good about what these words mean as we start introducing you to some of these topics. So if something is express, all we're saying is that the terms have been clearly stated. A question comes in, does a commercial easement still apply if the company is bought out if it's part of the acquisition? So you can acquire it if you buy out Duke, right? You can acquire it, but it doesn't happen automatically. Yep. So express versus implied, put easements aside for the second. Express versus implied. If something's express, it means that the terms are clearly stated. Maybe I stated those terms in an email or a text message or some kind of official formal document. Maybe I had a phone conversation with you, or maybe we had this conversation face to face. The delivery doesn't matter. It could be oral, it could be in person. The point with an express is that the terms of the agreement are clearly stated. If we compare an express to an implied agreement, implied, we're telling you the terms are not clearly stated. I don't explain things, I just start acting. And when we start talking about agency, we're going to talk about express versus implied. Implied agency, I just start acting like your agent without having the conversation, without telling you what it means for me to be your agent, what you get, what you benefit, what you owe, none of that. I don't have any of those conversations with you. I just start acting like your agent. That's implied. And one thing we're going to learn is that in real estate, particularly with agency and contracts, we don't see much implied. What we require is express. In other words, that the terms are clearly stated. So having this basic understanding of these words, again, that we're going to see over and over and over again, I recommend putting these on a flashcard because, again, we're going to see them over and over and over again. Now let's go back to easements. And on page 57, we explain the different ways that easements can be created. So easements can be created on an express agreement. You've given express permission. The terms have been clearly stated. They could be created on an implied. They could be created by your actions. An example of an implied easement would be an easement by necessity. Last week, we talked about how you can't landlock somebody. When I say landlock, you can't prevent them from coming or going off their property, off their land. So if an easement is necessary, because you can't landlock them, that would be an example of implied easement. And then easements can also be created by operation of law. So if the judge rules an easement, then that would also create an easement. An example of that, we have them over on page 58. It's called an easement by prescription. And with an easement by prescription, basically you have a claimant that's been using the property for the last 20 or so years, long time, 20 or so years. And they've been using it for so long, they go to a judge, they request an easement by prescription, and if granted, they will have permission to continue using that land. So in other words, an easement could be created because you've been doing it so long, you've been doing it for 20 years, using somebody's land for 20 years. And now you go to the judge and say, look, I've been using it for 20 years. Can I just have official permission to use it? Operation of law would create that easement. When we get into Unit 5, we're going to take easement by prescription a step further. And when we get into Unit 5, we're going to learn that there's a case where the claimant may not go to the judge and request permission. The claimant may go to the judge and request the land. They may request title. So we're going to take easement by prescription a step further when we get to Unit 5. But right now, let's just focus on easement by prescription. Remember, at easement, you're just been granted permission. So maybe it's not even the whole land. Maybe it's just a corner of your fence that has been there for the last 20 years. Maybe it's just a portion of the land. But again, we'll take that a step further. Yes, ma'am. Joy, good morning.
Good morning. I was curious about the easement by prescription. In the book, it says that this prescriptive period is 20 years in North Carolina. Is it saying that in order for it to be granted or be taken to court and approved, it has to have been 20 years, or
That's
once
it.
approved, it's 20 years more?
Yeah. No. So once you've been using it for 20 years, then you go to a judge and you request an easement by prescription.
And
But-
that can be forever? It runs with the
Yep.
land forever?
Yep. Well, whatever the judge grants. Yep. But let's face it, if you've been using it for 20 years and now all of a sudden you're going to a judge, but that's the key there. You have to have that use.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So creation of easements, different ways they can be created. And if we can create easements, that means we can also terminate easements. So different ways that easements can be terminated. Well, cessation of purpose. If the reason that the easement was created no longer exists, then we can terminate the easement. Let's say, for example, you have a large wooded lot and somebody contacts you and they want to timber your lot. And of course, they're going to pay you, right? They're going to pay you to come take your timber, but you grant them an easement so they can come and go off and on your property to timber your lot. When all that wood is gone, they have no other reason to be there, right? They've timbered it all, they've gotten it all. So that would be cessation of purpose. Another example of another reason why easements may terminate is merger of parcels. So I think the eloquent drawing I did for you guys last week, this is our parcel of land. And this is lot A. And this is lot B. There we go, lot A and lot B, and we have an easement. So B can access the road, pretending the road's down here at the bottom. So we have an easement with a driveway, boom, okay. So there's our easement. B has to use the easement. This is our pertinent easement that we looked at last week. Merger of parcels says if A buys B or B buys A, it's now just one piece of land again. So we've taken the two, we've combined them together. One of them owns it, A or B. We no longer have a need for the easement because one individual owns the entire land now. An easement can be terminated by a release to the owner. So again, if back to our picture, what if they build another road to the side of the property? So now you have, again, here's our property. It's divided. A owns the bottom part, B owns the top part. And then DOT, we got a road down here. This is our road. And then DOT comes and builds a road up here. So I got a new road that B can now use to access the road. That would be a release. They don't need to use it anymore because now they have access to their own road. That could be a release of the easement. And then abandonment, if the person that had the easement had abandoned the easement of the property, that would terminate it. Questions on easements?
How long would something have to be abandoned for the abandonment to take in?
I don't know the answer to that, Joseph. I do know the judge would have to look at intention of the parties, before they could rule that. But that would definitely be something from a judge if we were going to abandon that.
Okay.
Yep.
Also, what if you have sold your property? So say you were talking about the 20 years. So what if I sold the property to somebody else and then they sold the property to somebody else, and all in all, it equals like, say, 25 years, but it's changed hands a few times. Does that play into the 20 years, or does it have to be 20 years for one person?
I think the judge is going to go with the claimant. They're going to say the claimant's been using it for 20 years. So if I sell you my land and somebody's on and they keep using it and you don't stop them, see, that's the key. You're
Okay.
not trying to get them off. You're not calling the cops and saying that somebody's on your property, you're trespassing, right? I mean, there's legalities to this, of course, but yeah, if the claimant's been doing it for 20 years and no owner has ever stopped them, then what they're claiming is that land that they've been using.
Okay.
Now, you buy my property, you move on and you say, get out now, and you take the action to get them out, then obviously they've not been using that for that continuous 20 years.
Okay, that's
They've
what I was
reset
thinking, but I
their
wanted to-
clock. Yep,
Okay. Thank you.
sure. So I kind of told you guys a little fib, just a little fib. I think when I started Unit 3, I said everything in Unit 3 is an encumbrance. That's a teeny tiny fib. Most of everything in Unit 3 is encumbrance. There is one thing in Unit 3 that is not officially an encumbrance, but it's here, so we're just going to mention it anyway. Compare a license to a personal easement in gross. So remember we said a personal easement in gross, somebody's coming to fish on your pond. They have permission to fish on your pond for as long as you own that property. You may also grant a license. A license is not an easement, it's a privilege. The difference, the license can be revoked. So if I give you a license to come fish on my pond and then 2 weeks from now I change my mind, with a license, I can take it back. If I grant you an easement in gross, a personal easement in gross, you can fish on my pond for as long as I own the property. So the difference is the license you can take back, and it's not an encumbrance. When you sell that property, if that your buddy comes fishing on your pond, they're now trespassing because that permission doesn't convey to the next owner. If they want to come fish on that pond, they need to knock on the door and ask the new owner, hey, you want to create an easement with me or a license with me and give me permission to come fish on your pond? Does that make sense? That's the thing with the easement and grosses. They're not automatic. When the owner no longer owns, those are done.
So like with the example of the tree guy that you gave,
Uh-huh.
would you, like, what would determine whether or not he gets a license? Because my thought would be that you would grant them a license since it's just for this one specific occasion.
That would be up to you guys, right? So if you think you want to be able to revoke it, then you may just want to grant him a license. If he says, no, I'm not going to pay you for this timber, I'm not paying you anything unless I can get an easement and personal easement and gross. So it would have to be a discussion between you guys. He has reason to want it for as long as there's timber. You may want to have reason to excuse him from your property. Does that make sense? So the two of you would need to come together and figure out, and money talks, doesn't it? So how much are you paying me for that timber? I can put up with a lot for a short amount of time if money's involved. Anybody else with me? Come take all my timber. When you're done, you're done. And that's the agreement that we would make. Or I give you a license, and when I just get tired of you for no particular reason, I can kick you off. You probably wouldn't want that. So we may have to agree to do, something else. This is a lot more risky, yes, because I could have a reason to kick you off. I could literally just wake up the next day and say, nah, I changed my mind. So it'd have to be that agreement between the parties. Does the license go with the land? Nope, it does not convey. So if I give you a license to fish on my pond and I sell, and you come back and fish, you are trespassing because somebody else owns that land. You'd have to get permission from them. Easement and gross does not convey. License do not convey. Another encumbrance that we talk about in Unit 3 is called an encroachment. These encumbrances, these are bad. Write that down. Encroachments are bad. As a matter of fact, they are so bad, they have the word roach built right there into them. Ugh. They're that bad. So what the heck is an encroachment? with an encroachment, an improvement on your property extends over onto your neighbors. Maybe it's a fence, maybe it's the shed, maybe it's part of the driveway. But an improvement on your property extends over into your neighbor's property line. So you have an improvement on their property. You're encroaching on their property. The only way to properly discover a survey is, to discover an encroachment, there we go, is to have a survey done. Now, we're going to talk about surveyors and the surveyor when we get to Unit 4. So bear with me just 1 second. But the surveyor's job, we will learn, is to come out and identify the property lines. You and I might be able to eyeball it. We may even be able to put our hands on a survey map and look at it. But that doesn't make me a certified licensed surveyor. So the only way to, hear me, I say, properly disclose a survey or encroachment is to have a survey done. Again, we'll talk more about that. And because it's your improvement on your neighbor's property, that could make both titles unmarketable, which means we may not be able to convey. If either one of them are selling and we have this encroachment, we may not be able to convey. This should be discovered. The buyer will have a period of time to do various tests and inspections. When they're under contract, we will talk about that. We're getting there. But one of the inspection they may choose to have done is a survey. And if a survey discovers an encroachment, it will be on the seller to clear up before settlement. A couple different ways we can clear it up. Well, I can make you remove your improvement. I could say, come take down your portion of the fence or the shed or the driveway, whatever is encroaching. The other thing we could do to fix it, maybe we create an easement. Maybe we just create an impertinent easement and give that fence permission to be there. I don't know how they're going to clear it up. But what I do know is if an encroachment is discovered, the seller will need to clear it up before they can convey, so they can convey that clear marketable title. So again, more on surveys in Unit 4. Here's a good picture for us. This is a heck of an encroachment. You guys see that guy's shed? I mean, that's a big chunk of it right there. Usually you may talk about like a corner or something, but this is a whole wing on this building that's encroaching. This is a huge encroachment. And again, if this is discovered before closing, the seller will need to clear it up before they can convey.
Does that work if you've had an encroachment for, say, 20 years?
Now what can you do, Mary? You can
Go to
request
court
a,
and have it given to them?
that's right. You could go and request an easement, in this case, an easement by prescription. My building's been there for 20 years. Why is it a problem now? Make it right, Judge. And
Okay.
that's all we're doing with an easement by
I just
prescription.
wondered if that worked the same way.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Questions on an encroachment? So we've talked about the encumbrances and we mentioned taxes the other day, but the last part of this unit is really all about taxes. So we're going to talk a little bit about it and then we're going to pick our calculators up. So let's first start talking about property taxation. In North Carolina, we do something called ad valorem property tax. You need to know that, ad valorem. North Carolina charges property tax on every single real property every single year. You may have charities or non-for-profits that get tax breaks. They may have senior tax exemptions, but there's still taxes due. Taxes help support our government functions. Your property taxes are going to support your city, your county, municipality. And when we talk about ad valorem, what we're really saying is that in North Carolina, we are assessed, our tax assessment is at market value. Some other states may use a percentage of market value. We're going to do examples. When we pick our calculator up, we're going to do examples of both. We may see ad valorem, we may see other states. We're always going to do what the problem tells us. And in ad valorem, our taxes are expressed as a tax rate per 100. So let's say, for example, the city county has set the tax rate, and I'm just kind of making numbers up for the time being. They've set the tax rate at point, let's say 7.5 per 100. In this case, when we see this tax rate, we're going to see that word per, and we're going to interpret it to mean divide. So to get our rate, we just take 0.75 and divide it by 100. And now I have a tax rate of 0.0075. The tax rate is set annually, and it can change from year to year. Whatever the city or the county or the municipality feels that they need to support their government functions for this year, they can adjust the tax rates accordingly. Boy, they've been capitalizing on high home values here lately, haven't they? Heck yeah, they have. Values go up. Guess what's happening to our taxes? You better believe they're going up too. So they're capitalizing in on that. But our tax rate can change. And in North Carolina, we have something called the Machinery Act. The name itself is a problem topic because what does that have to do with taxes, right? So when you write down North Carolina Machinery Act equals taxes, North Carolina taxes. And what the Machinery Act does is it puts a ceiling on cities and counties and municipalities. They're free to set whatever tax rate they want. They can do whatever, charge whatever they want, have different rates, different processes. They can do whatever they want to. But the Machinery Act kind of puts a ceiling on them. It keeps them in control. So it sets standards for how they tax, how they assess property. I'll talk more about that in a second. And then we mentioned these tax exempt or tax decline or limited exemptions. So you might have a non-for-profit or charity, senior exemptions. They may qualify for less than the normal tax rate. So various things may have a tax exempt status. Now, when it comes to taxation, the city county has to assess the properties to determine the tax assessment. How much is the property assessed for to determine taxes? Tax assessment and assessment to buy or sell a home are two different processes. They are two totally different things. So in other words, when you look at the tax assessed value of a property, that doesn't mean diddly squat for the true value of the home. It's a totally different process. They mean different things. Again, I will talk more about that in 1 second. In North Carolina, as we said, our tax assessed value is 100%. That's the ad valorem piece. It's 100% of true market value. Whatever the city, county, or municipality determine as the tax assessed value, that's our assessed value that we pay our taxes on. Other states may use an assessed value of less than market value. Again, we're going to see math examples of both. Again, we're always going to do what the problem tells us to do. If the problem tells you to assess the property on the market value less than market value, you do what the problem tells you to. Please don't argue with the problem and say, well, I'm in North Carolina, so it's 100%. Always do what the problem tells you to. So in North Carolina, if we do ad valorem, other states, and I don't know specifically what other states, but other states may use their tax rates in a form of a mill. With ad valorem, we divide by 100. With a mill, we divide by 1,000. Ad valorem is divide by 100 per 100. A mill is 1/1000. So for example, if the problem tells you that it's 15 mills and it wants you to know what the tax rate is, you take 15 divided by 1,000. And now we have a tax rate of 0.015. So some states ad valorem, or North Carolina ad valorem, other states may use a mill. So just a nice side-by-side comparison. North Carolina ad valorem, we use the assessed value as our market value. Other states use a mill. Their assessed value may be less than the market value. So I want you guys to turn with me, if you will, in your books to page 64. And what we're going to look at on page 64 is our North Carolina taxation timetable. And when we're looking at these dates, most of these dates are going to be the current year, except for the January 5th date. That is next year. So let's look at these dates. January 1st, Happy New Year. We all have a tax lien filed on our property for the year. What a great way to start the year, right? Every single one of us in the state of North Carolina. I don't know how much you owe yet, but I do know on January 1st, you have a tax lien filed on the property. Fast forward to July, just a few days ago on July 1st, they would have set the tax rate for this year. What is that tax rate? How much do they need to collect? That per 100 for city, county, school board, fire district, whatever. They mail the bills in August. The tax bill for each year is due and payable on September 1st. If it's not paid by January 5th next year, it is late. And on January 6th, you start accruing interest. So if you don't pay your tax bill, you have till the 5th, January 5th of the next year. If you haven't paid it by the 5th, on the 6th, it starts accruing interest. Remember, you can't convey with an outstanding tax bill. This is not only a lien, is it? This is a superior lien. So this one's going to come up first as delinquent, and you'll owe those taxes. I think of all of this, this is important. This gives us an idea of how this works. But the one that we're going to see again and again is this September. We don't even get the bills to September. So it's what, July 6th? Is that right? I'm so off on my days right now. Whatever today is before September. I know that much. So it's before September. So if we go to closing today, you buy my house today, do we know 2023 taxes yet? Do we know what the tax bill for 2023 is going to be yet? No, we haven't even gotten the bill yet, have we? So we don't know this year's taxes. So if you buy my house today, the best we have to go on is last year's taxes. So we're going to get to a point where we talk about sharing this tax bill this year. If you buy my house today, is it fair for either one of us to be responsible for the full year? Does that sound fair to you? I shouldn't have to pay the full year. I didn't own it the whole year, neither did you. So when we get into future units, we're going to talk about how we can take this annual tax bill and we can share that responsibility. We can make it fair. So when we're going to closing on July 6th and we don't know this year's tax bill, we want to know how we're going to share the responsibility. The best thing we have to do is look at 2022 taxes. Once that bill comes out in September, we know that we know that amount for the year. And so we know how much to charge. So in North Carolina, our taxation timetable, remember I said the tax rate is set every year? The tax rate is set every year. There's also the assessed value. There's two different pieces, the tax rate, and then the other piece is the assessed value. North Carolina, to reappraise our assessed value, we're on an octennial reappraisal, which means for tax purposes, our assessed value is reassessed every 8 years. City, county, municipality may also have the option to do a horizontal adjustment every 4 years. And a horizontal adjustment is just everybody across the board. All of us are going to have an increase of 0.5%. The octennial appraisal, every 8 years, they go in and study the neighborhoods. They study the value of the area. Horizontal is just flat across the board. And they do have those rights to do that every 4 years. So again, this is important that you guys hear what I'm saying. The tax rate can change from year to year to year. The assessed value, what it's worth down at the tax office, either do a reappraisal every 8 years or a horizontal adjustment every 4 years.
What was the first thing you said what's every year again?
The tax rate can
Tax
change
rate.
every year.
Okay, thank you.
So it's the difference in the tax rate and the assessed value. Now, a few minutes ago, I mentioned the process. The tax department puts a different assessment on it than what an appraiser will put on it. If you sell your house, the buyer's going to have an appraisal. And the appraisal is going to tell us what the home is worth today. That has nothing to do with the tax value, with the assessment value. It's two different processes, you guys. We're going to talk about the appraisal. I got a whole unit dedicated to the appraiser. So we're going to look at the appraiser's part for originating a loan in unit 17. Right now, we're just focusing on the tax assessment. So a difference in the two processes. First off, for the appraisal, they actually go to the property. They go in the specific home. They look at the specifics of the home because they're trying to determine a value of that property. For tax purposes, they may drive up and down the street. For tax purposes, they're not looking at the individual property. They're looking at the area, the neighborhood, the surrounding areas and neighborhood. What kind of growth have we had or we expected to have? Like I said, they may drive up and down the street. They may just sit behind their computer and crunch a bunch of numbers to get that tax value, that assessed value as well. It's so common. Remember what we said, you guys. Part of our job is to help educate the public through the process. And you're going to work with buyers and sellers. And at some point, they're going to look at the assessed value of taxes, and they're going to look at what the home is listed for or what it's sold for. And they're going to say, well, these don't match. This isn't fair. If it's a seller's market, the buyers are going to look at the listing price and look at the assessed value of taxes and say, they're overcharging me. The list price is more than the assessed value. They're overcharging me. No, it's two different things. If it's a buyer's market, sellers are looking at that number and saying, my home is worth more than that. Why does the tax assessed value only say this? So I think part of our job is making sure when this comes up in your career, because it will, making sure that they understand that what they see from the tax department has absolutely nothing to do with what the appraiser says or what the home is worth today. Two totally different processes. So let's put the appraiser off to the side for now. Again, we'll come back to them in unit 17. And right now we're just focusing on that tax assessment as a whole, community, neighborhood, subdivision, however they divvy that up. The other thing that the government may do, other than taxes, another thing they may do are special assessments. And we talked about these again last week. So our special assessment and our real property taxes were our superior liens, meaning they get paid first. If the government puts a special assessment on your property, they're charging you because they're going to do an improvement to the property. Maybe they're going to install streetlights. Or maybe they're going to put sidewalks in. Maybe they're going to hook a whole neighborhood up to public water or sewer. When they make that improvement on the property, they're going to issue a special assessment, government issued special assessment. They'll let the owners pay for some of those improvements. Those are our special assessments, and our government special assessments are our superior liens. Another type of special assessments that we have is from your owners association or your HOA. Those are not government special assessments. We're going to talk about the owners association, the HOA. I think units, yeah, that comes up in unit 6. So our government special assessments. Questions? All right, let's talk some math. Did y'all bring your brand new calculators today? Yep, head bobs. Yep, good. I see them. Good, good, good. If you don't have a calculator yet, you can use your phone. Get it sooner rather than later, please. So before we do math, we always got to start with the formula. I've given you one of two things. I'm saying the same thing twice. Give me a shot and try the T-bar, or if you're a formula-minded person, there's 3 formulas you just need to know. I'll give you just a second to write all this down, or whatever you want to write down, and then we'll talk about it. But I want you to have one or both in front of you so you can do the math problems that we're getting ready to see. I think all formulas, y'all hear my absolute word there? All formulas should go on a flashcard, or I think you should take a piece of paper in your notebook, call it formulas, and every time I introduce you to a formula, put it on that piece of paper. So in the end, you'll have them all together in one place. One way or another, you need to know the formula. Knowing the formula is like 80% of the battle with doing these problems. If you don't know the formula, you don't know what to do with the numbers. And quite frankly, you guys, if you don't know the formula, you can stop wasting precious test time, put down B or C or D or whatever your favorite is, and move on. So in order to answer these questions, you got to know the formula. I always get asked at the end of class, can't you just hand us a piece of paper with all the formulas on it? And my answer is the same every single class. What do you think my answer is? No. Why? Because I'm handing you the formulas throughout the class. I'm telling you, you guys need to memorize them. How do you memorize them? You either put it on a flashcard or you put it on a piece of paper called formulas. To have everybody so far, you got to memorize it. I know it. I need you to know it so you can answer these test questions. Remember with the T-bar, a couple different things. Our back fourth line, our east-west line, if you will. Our back fourth line means divide. And with the T-bar, our up-down line means multiply. So again, you're looking at the same thing twice. You're either looking at the T-bar or you're looking at the formulas. If we take the tax bill divided by the assessed value, you have the tax rate. Annual tax bill divided by the tax rate gives you the assessed value times tax rate equals annual tax bill. So again, you're looking at the same thing twice, a couple different options here. Makes no difference to me which way you go. It's also important that we know the formula. For example, does everybody see where that says annual tax bill? Does everybody have that word written down, annual tax bill? So what if you're skipping along in life and you're doing unit 3 math problems and you see a question and the question wants to know what is the monthly tax bill? Is monthly tax bill part of my formula? No. So what do I have to solve for? I have to solve for annual. And then am I done? Did I find my answer? No, I got to take that a step further. When I have annual tax bill, how many months are in a year? 12. Yep, so we take our annual tax bill, we divide it by 12, and that gives us monthly. I see some of you guys smiling. Does that mean you've already fallen for it? If you haven't fallen for it yet, you will. You will. Trust me, it's okay. I'd rather you guys fall for these things now. Let's work the kinks out now. So on test day, you're on alert for this stuff. Does this make sense? So again, I say all this as a warning. I hate to say they like to trick you, but there, it's out there. They like to make sure that you have a really good understanding of this stuff. So when you are reading the problem, again, knowing the formula helps you know what to solve for. So you know you're solving for example, annual tax bill. So when it says monthly, you know you need to take that extra step. Every single word means something. Everybody good so far? Head bobs, a couple thumbs ups. Okay. So as we said, property taxes can be calculated one of two ways. North Carolina, we do an ad valorem where our tax rate is something per 100. So for example, the problem tells you that the city tax rate is 0.73 per 100. Again, when it comes to taxes and you see that word per, that's just a fancy way of saying divide. So you pick a calculator up, 0.73 divided by 100 gives you a tax rate of 0.0073. That 0.0073 is what I can use in my formula. It's what I can use in my T-bar. So we may have to do a little bit of work to get to the T-bar. We may have to do a little bit of work after we use the T-bar. But understanding what goes in the T-bar will help us know. So there's our tax rate of 0.0073 ad valorem. Other states, we said, may use a mill. A mill is 1/1000th. So the problem may tell you this state, this area uses 17 mills. They're not going to tell you the thousands, guys. That's something you need to know. It's not expressed that way. They're just going to say 17 mills. You know, you need to pick your calculator up. 17 divided by 1,000 gives you 0.017. And again, that's the tax rate that we're looking for our formula. They'll give you one or the other, per 100 or 1/1000th, ad valorem or mill. They're never going to give you both. I just said they try to trick you, right? They're not cruel. They may be mean, but they're not cruel. They cannot give you both without specifying which one they want you to use. Does that make sense? So you're going to get one or the other. The problem may also give you, like, for example, the rate or the mill, the rate, and they may want to know the mill or the ad valorem. What's the opposite of divide? Multiply. So that's right. Thank you. Multiply. So if it gives you 0.017, didn't we divide to get there? So now can't we multiply to get back to 17 mills? So working back and forth. If dividing's not working out for you, try multiplying and see what you get. Are we good? You got your formula written down in front of you? So when we do math together, we're going to do a few together. We always do a few where we talk it through out loud. And then I can't have all the fun. So once we talk a few out loud, then I will let you guys work one or two depending on the math subject. I'm going to let you work one or two on your own, which we'll come back as class and talk about it. And then I have plenty of practice for you guys. And I'll show you where that is when we're done here. You guys, please always remember, you're not preparing to take a math test. You're preparing to take a real estate exam with some math in it. I fear sometimes we let math drive this class. I'm going to tell you guys something right now. You can get all the math wrong and still pass this test. There's not enough math alone to fail you. If you can use some of the math to your advantage, great. But I don't want you guys spending the next 2 months doing nothing but stressing about math. I got plenty of other things coming up in the next few weeks for you guys to stress about. Fair enough? So I only have a limited amount of time that I can allocate in class for the math because it's not our #1 priority. Again, I got practice for you guys. I'm a big fan of practicing. You're going to be sick and tired of me telling you to practice the math by the time we're done. But you've got to, because it's really easy when you watch me do it. The true test is, can you do it without me? And that's what I need you guys to be able to be sure for the test. The other thing I had to say about I'm a fan. Have you guys figured that out yet? If it was up to me, we'd have a lot more math in this class, but we don't. So sigh. Another thing that I like so much about math, you guys, everybody's brain sees it differently. So that's why I gave you a T-bar and formulas. If you're a formula person, you need the formulas. If you're willing to try the T-bar, give it a shot. I've given you this. Maybe as we're solving the math, as we're working through it, you find another way to do it. Quite frankly, I don't care how you do it. Just get to the right answer. So if you find a way that's more simpler or easier for you to see and do than what we're doing in class, makes no difference to me. All I need to know from you with the math is the right answer, A, B, C, or D. It's all multiple choice. Does it help alleviate some of the... Did you guys ever I hated this in high school. Did you guys ever get points deducted from your math test because you didn't work the problem the same way as the teacher did? You got the right answer. Did you go, ooh, that was like the most infuriating thing to me. No more. All I want to know is the right answer. Is that good news? Miss Cheryl was mine. We still remember those teachers, don't we? All right. It is break time. So we're going to go take a break, drink a cup of coffee, whatever we do. Grab a calculator. When we come back, we're going to pick up and do some property taxation math. So let's take 10. Can you guys hear my alarm today? Okay, good. Welcome back. That 10 minutes go by fast, doesn't it? That's why I set you a timer. It's easy to find other stuff to do. Me too. All right, so let me take attendance. We're going to jump in, work some of this math again. We're going to do a couple together, and then I'll turn you loose. When we see a math problem, the first thing I want you to do is just read it. It's so easy to want to grab your calculator and start doing something. Stop, breathe and read and breathe. So, and I have taken attendance, so make sure you tell me you're back, please. So we see a math problem. The first thing we want to do is just read it. This says, calculate the annual property tax due for a property in Forsyth County with a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100, a market value of 285,000, and an assessed value of 250,000. So we read the problem, and when we read a problem, anytime we see the word rate or percent, we know for the most part, we can use a T-bar. I may not know what's going in it yet, but I saw the word rate or percent, and I know I can use the T-bar. Where did we say the rate or percent always goes? Always in the bottom right. Does everybody hear my absolute word there? Always, the rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. So that's the easy one to figure out. So we have a tax rate of 1.01 per 100, which is just a fancy way of saying divide. So now I have a rate, 0.0101. The problem gives me a market value and it gives me an assessed value. In this case, if it wanted me to figure it on market value, it would have to tell me that. But on this case, it's given me a distractor. Let's go back to our formula. What does our formula want me to use? Does it want me to use the market value or does it want me to use the assessed value? The formula wants me to use the assessed value. So in this case, the market value is our distractor. We got to know the formula so we can eliminate distractors. They will give you distractors. They will give you more numbers than what you need. The only numbers I care about are the numbers in my formula. Everybody with me? So my formula says assessed value, which means I can use that here. And then what I'm solving for, my X, is the annual property taxes. Always focusing on what the question's asking me. Now that I've set myself up, I know the up-down line needs multiply. So on our calculators, we take 285,000 times 0.0101. And we get annual taxes . 250. See what I did there? Yep.
I
Yep.
was
Yep.
gonna say,
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused.
I apologize. Thank you. There we go. I didn't think my number looked right. Okay. So we use the assessed value of 250,000. There we go. So our annual taxes for this year are $2,525. Again, knowing the formula. That's right. I love it.
I have another question. So how do I know that the market value is the one that's the distraction?
Because we know the formula is
Okay.
calling for the assessed value. So when we talk about what we're saying is, if
Oh,
you
the
want
per 100 makes it.
the ad valorem.
Gotcha.
Yep. So what you're looking at here when we're referring to market value, this might be what it's listed for is 285, but the county has assessed it at 250. And that's what we're saying. Those amounts are not the same. They don't mean the same thing. They don't do the same thing. Yep.
So in what situation would we be solving for the, the market value rather
I'm
than,
getting there. I'm getting there. Yep. We're going to do one of those next where we can see that next, Joseph. Thank you. Again, this is just practice and knowing the formula. What's it calling for? Annual taxes, tax rate, and assessed value. Because that's what our formula tells us. So let's look at when the market value may come into play. So we see a problem, and again, we just read it. Calculate the annual property tax due for property in Forsyth County with a property tax rate of 1.01 per 100, a market value of 127,000, and an assessed value of 85% of market value. So again, I've read it. I don't know what else I can do yet, but I do know I saw rate or percent. I do know I can throw down a T-bar. Always start there. And then start with what's easy. Where does the rate or percent always go? It always goes in the bottom right. So I think it's the same. Yeah. So 101 divided by 100. So we have our rate, 0.101. Now we're told the market value is $127,000 and the tax assessed value is going to be 85% of market value. So they give us the market value. Do I know the assessed value? No, but I know how to solve for it, don't I? How do I solve for it? 85% of the market value. Who remembers what we said that word of means in a math problem? Of means, you guys are so cute, multiply. Of means multiply. So how do we find the assessed value? You take the market value of 85%. So my assessed value is 107,950. And again, the X, what we're solving for, always keep your question. There you go. Always keep your question in mind. So we have an assessed value of 107,950. I have a tax rate of 0.010. Anybody have questions on where I got those numbers? Somebody just said rate means right. Love it. Write that down. Rate equals right, because the rate goes always, always, always in the bottom right. Rate or percent. Up down line means multiply. So we just take our assessed value of 107,950 times 0.0101. And we get annual taxes. I'm just going to round there. I got 0.25 or 0.95 to 0.29. Yeah, but I'm just going to round there. 0.295, 0.30. So what are our annual taxes? $1,090.30. Questions on this one? A question comes in about rounding. So here's what we need to know about rounding. They say to round at least 2 decimal places. So if you go at least 2, but guys, here's the deal, and this is important. You cannot miss a question by rounding alone. So in other words, the answer choices aren't that close that if you got 0.295 and I got 0.30, those aren't both going to be answer choices. If you get 0.295, you should be able to look at the choice and say 0.30 is what I rounded to. Does that make sense? They're not testing you on rounding. They're testing you on the specifics of the math. Yep, great question. But I say at least go 2. Some will say 3. I say at least 2. Give yourself some change. Always give yourself some change. Don't get crazy and start rounding to whole numbers or something like that. Now you've gone too far. To give, at least give yourself some change. Okay, so we've looked at examples with the T-bar of multiplying because we've been solving for the up-down line. I do want to look at one quick example. We're going to see more and more as we go of other ways that the T-bar may look. So here's another problem. This one wants to know what's the assessed value of a property located in Kernersville with a tax rate of 0.85 per 100, an annual tax bill of $3,371. So again, starting with the easy one, bottom right is 0.85 per 100. My rate is 0.085. Now I know the problem in this case is asking me for the assessed value, which knowing our formula knows that now what we're solving for is this number. My annual tax bill goes on top. 3371. Remember, the back fourth line in the T-bar means divide. So you want to take your annual taxes and divide it by your rate. So on your calculator, 3371 divided by 0.0085. So we have an assessed value. What is this property worth? According to the tax department, $396,588.23.
So you said with the assessed value, that's the one where it's more taken into consideration the area as a whole, but the market value is specifically because of that parcel of land.
That's right. It's the difference in the appraisal for an individual property or for tax purposes for a whole community, neighborhood. Yep. Questions? Okay, well, this has been a lot of fun, but guess what? It's your turn now. First off, set your chats to private. Everybody set your chat to private. And I want to hear from everybody. We talk about class participation. This is it. So I want to hear from everybody. I'm going to put a problem up. I'm going to give you time to solve it. When you're done, I want you to tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. That's all you have to tell me, A, B, C, or D. And I like to hear from everybody. Even if you're guessing, you still got a 25% chance of getting it right. The odds may be in your favor. Everybody ready? Private chat set? All right, tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. You've got one more minute. We'll talk about it. Okay. So what do we do first? We see a math problem. What do we do first? Just read it. It's amazing what happens when you just read. So a current market value of a property is 135,000. For tax purposes, it is assessed at 60% of market value. Tax rate is 2.45 per 100 of assessed value. What is the annual tax liability? Read the problem. Saw the word rate of percent. I may not know anything else, but at this point, I know I can use a T-bar. So what's the easy one? Let's plug in that tax rate, 2.45 per 100. 0.0245. So I have my tax rate. Identified my X. What am I solving for? My annual taxes, which I know the formula. So I know that's the number on top. So now the next piece is to find my assessed value. My assessed value is 60% of market value. Do I know my assessed value? Not at this moment, but I know how to get to it, don't I? So what's that word of mean? That word of is telling us to take the market value of 135,000 and times it by 60%. 135,000 times 60% gives me an assessed value of 81,000. I've completed my T-bar. Up, down line on the T-bar means multiply. 81,000 times 0.0245 gives me $1,985 when I round it. I like seeing woohoos. So we first just plug in the T-bar. We've started with our tax rate, because we know that goes in the bottom right. And then we took our market value, 60% of market value, to find our assessed value, 81,000. And then the last step is just to multiply 81,000 by 0.20245 gives me 1985. Remember when I said on day one, or last week, I guess not day one, but when we introduced the T-bar, I know sometimes, I talk a whole lot about what goes here. And the reason I do that is because sometimes in the heat of the test, we may not remember, does the assessed value go on top or does it go on bottom? So I'm a big fan of trying to preserve your test time. And when you find yourself staring at a blank piece of paper, the numbers are not going to magically manifest themselves. So my recommendation, once we put in that tax rate or that rate or percent, if you're not sure whether to divide or multiply, I suggest doing it both. Because now when I take that number, I switch those up. Let's see, 0.0245. I have an annual tax bill of $3,306,122. Does it make sense to have a $3 million tax bill when the property is only worth $81,000? I would not advise you to buy this house as your agent. I would encourage you to keep looking. Does this make sense? So again, I think we get so bogged down. I don't know when to multiply and I don't know when to divide. I think do it both ways because it's pretty clear now which way is right. Does this make sense? And that way you can answer your question and you can go on. So the rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. The formulas tell you where the other numbers go. But if in the heat of the test, if you don't remember what the formula says, you can play around with those numbers and for the most part determine which one's the right answer. Questions on this one? Can I erase the pink? Everybody have it? Okay. That was fun. Let's do another one. Tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. Give me another minute or so, then we'll talk about it. I think some of you may want to go back and read the question again. What's the question asking you for? Give that one more minute and we'll talk about it. Tricky, tricky. All right, we got a whole lot going on in this one, don't we? So let's break it down. What do we do first? Just read, breathe and read. The market value of a house is 84,500. Taxes are assessed at 35% of market value. Tax rate is 30 mils. What are the monthly taxes? All sorts of stuff going on this one. Good times, huh? All right. I don't know anything else, but at this point, I know I can throw down a T-bar and I know I can put in the rate. A mil is 1/1000th. So to get the rate, we're going to take 30 and divide it by 1,000 to get a rate of 0.03. The problem is asking me, what are the monthly taxes? Does my formula allow me to solve for monthly taxes? What's my formula call for? I have to solve for annual. So I got to start by solving for annual, because that's what the formula gives me. You can't change the formula. The formula is what it is. So memorize that thing. That's why it's carved in stone. Okay. The formula is what it is. So I'm solving for my annual taxes so I can take it that step further to find monthly. Then I have a market value of 84,500. Taxes are assessed at 35% of market value. Of means multiply. So 84,500 times 35%. Y'all want to live here? Means the assessed value is on $29,575. Up down line means multiply. So 20,000, 9,575 times our rate of 0.03 gives me $887.25 annual. Is that what I'm looking for? Nope. I got to take it a step further and find monthly. Tricky, tricky. Son of a gun. I know. So again, we did this once, so we learn, right? We're working the kinks out now. So we know. Did they give you the annual for answer choice? Well, of course they did. So now to solve for the problem, we need to take that extra step. There are 12 months in a year. So we're going to take that extra step and divide by 12 to get C. We've got to read every single word, you guys, means something. Are they going to give you the answer they think they're going to get? You're going to get? Of course they are. Does that mean? I don't know. It is what it is. My question to you guys, as we did these problems together, if you didn't get them right, you don't have to answer this, just answer to yourself. If you didn't get them right, do you see why? I see head bobs, and that's how we learn. Sometimes we got to get these wrong to learn. I fear sometimes that you guys, especially when it comes to math, you're so worried about getting it wrong that you just don't try. So this is my question to you guys. At some point, we got to work the kinks out. Do y'all want to work the kinks out now in class and in your practice? Or do you want to wait till test day and try to work them out? I'd like to think we want to work those kinks out, make those careless mistakes now, so we're ready for tests. Does that make sense? Practice, practice, practice. And I'm getting ready to give you some. Never fear. You never have to ask yourself, you're still going to give me practice on this? The answer is, if it's math, yeah, as much as you want. I got you. Questions? Okay, so that wraps up Unit 3. Those key terms are back on page 51. Again, knowing what those words mean. Knowing what the word means is a big chunk of it. The key point review starts on page 65. And then your student quiz is on 67. There is some math in your book in the student quiz. On pages 68 and 69, some of the math that we just did. The units that have math. Unit 3 is the first math unit we've seen. But the units that have math, those units have these little math concepts. And this kind of walks you through the math, gives you some more examples, maybe explains it in a different way than I did, so you can help your brain see it. I do recommend you guys spend time with the math concepts, going over the math that we cover in class. I do not think you guys should read the math concepts. I don't think we read math. I think we do math. So use this math concept as extra practice. If you see a for example, that should be telling you to pick up your calculator and your pen and your paper. And then we also have these 50 pages in the back of the book. They start on page 83, no, 50 pages, 50 problems. There we go, in the back of the book. I call the back of the book problems like 201 math. And so what we do, the units that we have math, I pull out the numbers that relate to the math that we just did. So once you do the end of the unit, and once you do the practice I've given you a Learn, Test, Pass, I think a good test for you guys is if you can do, in this case, number 22, with those 50 problems in the back of the book. And each time we talk about math, I'll give you more problems in the back of the book. So I encourage you to write this down. So when you're practicing this math, this gives you just that little bit extra more. I've always felt that if you can do the 50 problems starting on page 803, you can do this math. So I'm going to break it down in chunks for you guys as we go through it to help you get it. There is other math in Unit 3 that we have not talked about yet. I'm going to skip it for the time being. Remember a few minutes ago, we were talking about you buying my house, and it's not fair for either one of us to pay the full year tax bill. You guys remember this? So we were going to make it fair. We were going to share it. What that actually called is something referred to as prorating. Now, we just introduced you to prorating in your book on page 61. I'm going to hold off on this for now until we get to Unit 21. So we're going to put this off to the side for the time being. You may see practice that has prorating now. You're welcome to try it. I'd rather you guys hold it off until 21 when we get there. So I'll remind you that this is here on page 61 when we get to 21. But I think right now, let's just focus on our basic tax calculations. Annual property taxes as part of the assessed value using the tax rate. And then when we get to 21, we're going to take that information and build on it. We're going to expand on it and talk about the proration, that making that shared expense fair between the buyer and the seller. So more to come in 21. Yes, ma'am, Joy.
So does that include where on page 63, it says about the equalization factor? Will that be touched on more later too, something we don't need to focus on now?
No, you probably have more math in the book than, and what did you see? What did you say?
On page 63, right under property taxation tax rates, it says the third little paragraph down, it says if an equalization factor, a
Yeah.
number by which.
Yeah,
the
no, we don't deal with that. So, yep.
Okay.
So there's more math in your book than what you need. I think that's kind of a good rule of thumb. So we're just going to focus on the math that we cover in class. So that's good news, right? You can cross some stuff out.
Cool,
We don't
'cause I
talk
looked
about
at
it in
that and was
class.
like, what the hell?
You not more than you need to, right? I
Yeah.
agree. I
Okay,
agree.
thank you.
Of course. Other questions, comments? I do want to show you guys this. This just kind of reinforces what we were talking about. Watching me do the math just did very little for you guys. Look at it. Watch me get retained, what, 5–10%? Look at what happens when you go do it on your own. When you go do practice problems on your own, when you do it without me. I think I told you guys last week when I do math tutoring, the number one question I get is when do I divide? When do I multiply? The number two question I get is, can you sit with me during the test and do this, help me with this math? And the answer to that is no. I got to wean you guys off me at some point. And that's what I hope to do with this practice. I'll be with you in spirit. I'll be rooting for you, but that's as close to you as I can get. So it's so important that you guys practice, practice, practice. And I think this illustrates that. Additionally, but wait, there's more. If we look in our online learning system, in the Unit 3 material, there's a couple good quizzes in here. There's a property tax math worksheet, which gives you some additional practice. I do include the solutions. Studying the solutions isn't going to do you any good. Go try it on your own and then use the solutions as a guide to know if you got it right or not. And then in this Unit 3 quiz, there should be some math in there as well. So we got your book, we got the online learning system, we got a great place for you guys to start with Unit 3 math. Questions, comments, concerns? Very good. Get thumbs up or head bobs or something. Cool. Good enough, right? Do y'all want to play a game? Who wants to play a game? Grab your phones. Yay, get your phones. Games are fun. I know they're close to you. These things are tethered to us, aren't they? If you need to run to the other room real quick. Anybody ever Kahooted before? Oh, it's a good time, isn't it? All right, so what's getting ready to happen? You guys got your phones, and I'm getting you the easiest way to access Kahoot is to scan the QR code. You guys see this over here on the right? You can scan that QR code. If you're not a QR code person, you can go to the website. Over on the left there, kahoot.it. If you go to the website, you need a game pin. The slowest possible way to Kahoot is to download the app. So if the app is the way you want to go, you may not be able to play today because you'll still be downloaded. But again, if we can do the QR code. I see names coming in. You guys are picking your avatars. It's a whole lot of fun. You don't have to use your name. I'm fine if you want to use a nickname for Kahoot. Just keep it clean. All I ask, that's the voice of experience speaking. So what's going to happen as you guys are getting in? What's going to happen in just a minute? Your phone does not say anything. It's not doing anything right now. In just a minute, when we get everybody in, we are going to, my screen's going to change, and they're going to put a question up on my screen. Once we read the question, they'll give you the answer choices. That's when your phone changes. So one of the answer choices is red, one's blue, one's yellow, and one's green. You pick your answer choice on the screen and then you tap it on your phone and it'll lock you in. We can all see the results. We will never see your individual score. They do rate us who gets it right the fastest. We have a little podium at the end. Try to keep it a little competitive. I never make you guys Kahoot. So if you don't want to play, you don't have to. I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. And this is just a good opportunity for us to go back through and review the basics of what we just covered. Make sure we don't have anything we need to touch on or clean up, and make sure we're clear going forward. So the first Kahoot question I'm going to give you guys is kind of like a test, but I have to make it count because it's still part of the same Kahoot. So we're going to have kind of a test so we can see how it works. And then we're going to make sure that we can clarify, we know these answers again with more of the basic points. If your phone goes to sleep, you're going to disappear on the screen. So I think somebody's phone just went to sleep. So just wake it up. Is everybody in? Is everybody ready to Kahoot? This is going to be a lot of fun. Okay, we ready? All right. So we're getting ready to see a question. Question number 1. By the way, this is on units 2 and 3. I forgot to mention that. Question number 1 is just our test. So the main purpose of the Real Estate Commission is, now look at your phone. You guys see colors on your phone? So you select the appropriate. Do you want the red one, the blue one, that weird mustard color one, or the green one? The main purpose of the North Carolina Real Estate Commission is, we've got about 3 more seconds. Their main purpose, good job, guys, is to protect the public. Yes, they do issue your license, but that's in their effort to protect the public. Does that make sense? That's a part of what they do. But the reason they issue and regulate your license is to protect the public. Thank you, everybody, for not saying the blue one or the green one. We would have had problems, wouldn't we? Okay, so that's Kahoot. That's all you do. So you can see a question and you answer it, and then we kind of see overall how everybody does, and gives us an opportunity to talk about it and maybe clear up anything that needs to be fine-tuned. Was that fun? Okay, good. So now what Kahoot does, again, it gives us rankings. So Dimples, cute nickname, answered it right the fastest. I bet you if I look real close, I can figure out who that is. Okay, so Dimples answered it the fastest, followed by Turtle, Ladon, Serge, and Kiki. Question number 2. The rights of ownership of real property include all the following except. Got 5 seconds. Good. So when we talk about our rights of ownership, we're talking about those legal bundle of rights that we introduced you to in Unit 2. And when we think of our legal bundle of rights, we can always remember deep sea. So if we know nothing else, we can remember the twigs are deep sea. So you have disposition, exclusion, exception, possession, or enjoyment, excuse me, enjoyment, possession, and control. If something's appurtenant, what does it mean to be appurtenant? Appurtenant means it runs with the land. It has nothing to do with the right of ownership. It has to do with the land. It's going to convey from one owner to the next. Questions on this one? All right, let's see what we got. Turtle's on top now, Ladon and Serge. Joy Laura's on, Nijay's on. Let's see, Mo's our highest climber. She's up 8 places this round. Question number 3, the rights of the owner of a property located along the banks of a small stream are called. Five seconds. Those are our riparian rights. Yep, riparian rights mean no tide. So bodies of water that don't have a tide. If this helps, if you see riparian, you can start to see the word river in there. River doesn't have a tide. Streams, creeks, ponds, lakes, they don't have a tide. Those are our riparian rights. Littoral then are our water rights with a tide. So littoral is our ocean, sound. And then our lateral and subjacent support rights just talk about how we have the right to have our property supported by each side and underneath. So we can't have anybody digging underneath or each side that affects our support rights. Questions on this one?
It's not about the water rights, but with the subjacent, it's for underneath the ground, and with the lateral, it's for the
That's correct.
up
Yep.
of the ground. I was confused with that and wanted to get clarity on it.
Yep. So you may want a flashcard, you know, lateral equals beside, subjacent equals underneath, right? Just to keep those separate. Yep.
Okay.
So let's see. Turtle staying on top. You're going to have to tell me in a private chat who you are. Joy Laura's up. Serge, Ladon, Mo's on. Bree is our highest climber, up 4 places. Question number 4, brother and sister cannot concurrently own real estate in North Carolina as. Four seconds. Brother and sister can't own property is tenancy by the entirety. Who's tenants by the entirety set aside for? Married people. And in North Carolina, brother and sister can't be married because, you know, ew. So brother and sister can buy property as joint tenants. They can buy it as tenants in common. They cannot buy as tenants by the entirety. Questions on this one?
I just didn't understand how the question was worded.
Okay.
It would just, yeah. The question was just worded weird to me. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm open for what we can do to make this better. So if there's something we can do to clarify it for the next class, please reach out to me and let me know. Absolutely.
I think it was the concurrently word that was there.
So what's the word concurrent mean? We have 2 types of ownership, don't we? Concurrent and severalty. So concurrent tells us how many people own it. 2 or more. That's right. So you can either own it in severalty, just you, or you can own it concurrently, 2 or more. Yep.
Right. But looking at it and then trying to hurry and then looking at it and it was just kind of throwing me all at once.
It's a lot. And Kahoot times me. And guys, I have a character limit in Kahoot too. So our questions are very basic in Kahoot, unfortunately. And we're timed too. So we want to make sure we, get through it. But absolutely, anytime you guys come across something we can do to make it easier or better, please let me know. Thank you. All right, let's see what we got. Turtle's still on top. That didn't budge much, did it? Joy Laura's still on. Serge and LaDon. Mimi's on the board. Mo's our highest climber, up 3 places this round. Question number 5. Which of the following is a lien on real estate? Five seconds. When you see the lien, what's the word we think of? Loan. You owe somebody some money. In this case, who do you owe money to? The mortgage says you owe money to the lender. That's what that lien is for, is to protect the lender's interest, the mortgage. We're going to talk all about the mortgage, what that means, what that does. We have financing units. I actually got 2 units for financing. So when we get to 14 and 15, we'll spend a little bit more time talking about the lender's process and the mortgage. The others are encumbrances. These are all encumbrances. We were just looking for the lien. We were looking for the person that you owe money to. Questions on this one? Joy Laura's on top now. Serge and LaDon are up. Mimi's up. Vaughn's on the board. Nicole's our highest climber, up 4 places. And I think the last one of this Kahoot, real property taxation in North Carolina. Five seconds. September is the magic month to know when it comes to our taxes. So that bill comes out. They're not due until September. We can't pay taxes until that bill comes out. Listing the property, we do that in January. Penalties for paying, if you penalties, you're doing that January 5th of the next year. So the example we gave, you don't start accruing penalties or interest until January 6, 2024. And then our assessment, North Carolina, we do an octennial reassessment, which means every 8 years. So real property taxation, September in North Carolina. Again, that's the important month to know. And when we get into 21 and we prorate taxes, we're going to see that again. So again, we're just building you up to when we get there. I got Kahoot fans. Love it. It's a good time, huh? Questions on this one? It's supposed to be fun, of course, but I hope it's helpful too. If there's something that can be clarified, and if nothing else, it's exposure to extra test questions. So it's extra practice. We'll Kahoot several times, not all the time. That's another question I get. Can we Kahoot every day? No, I don't have that kind of time. But after every
Sure, you
couple of
said-
units or so, we'll Kahoot. Yeah, Timothy?
My apologies. You said those are questions that will be on the test?
No, no,
just-
no. This is just helping us understand the material. Yep. I do not give you test questions until test day. Fair enough. I give you samples and things that look similar to them, but you don't actually see those test questions until test day. All right. Now they do this big podium, dramatic podium win. So our third place winner is Serge with his pancakes. Our second place winner is LaDawn with her little graduation cap. And our first place Kahooter is Joy Laura, there it is. Mimi and Turtle are our fourth and fifth runners up. Overall, it was a really good Kahoot, you guys. I know some of you don't want to answer that fast, and you don't have to. To me, it's more important that you fine tune it and get it straight than it is to win Kahoot. Does that make sense? So please don't pressure yourself. And again, if Kahoot's too much pressure, you don't have to play. You don't want to play on your phone. I just ask that you please try to play along because again, hopefully it's helpful. But if we can throw some fun in there too, then why not? But that's what that was about. So we'll Kahoot again after a few more units. Questions? Okay, let's take our break and we come back. We're jumping into unit 4. All right. Welcome back. So I'm going to take attendance. And we are going to keep looking forward. We'll jump right into Unit 4. Unit 4 is our property description. So we're going to talk about how we can define parcels, how we can define property lines, and the different methods we have to describe property. So in this unit, we're going to talk about, we got several different types of legal descriptions. Legal descriptions help us identify the property. So we're going to talk about those types. We're going to talk about the importance of a survey, why buyers should consider having a survey done when they're investigating the property. And then we're also going to talk about kind of the main responsibility of the surveyor. And then there's some math in Unit 4, but this is what's up with math in Unit 4. I try not to be a mean person. I've already given you guys one math today in Unit 3. I'm not going to give you 2 maths in one day. To me, that just wouldn't be kind. So we're going to skip. We're going to do the material of Unit 4. We're going to skip the math for now. And then we'll come back up and pick the math for Unit 4 first thing on Tuesday. So we can break that up a little bit for you guys. Fair enough? Only one math a class. So ignore that calculate piece now. We'll deal with that when we first come together on Tuesday morning. And we have taken attendance. So thank you guys for telling me that you're back. Please remember to do so. So starting on page 71, we talk about that legal description. And the legal description, what that does is it identifies the exact location of a parcel of land. It may not tell us the improvements that are in it, but it gives us the parameters, if you will. And the rule of thumb here says that if it's within the parameters, then it's gonna run with the land. It's gonna be appurtenant. So you can see this legal description down here would define this parcel of land right here. And even though it's not going to identify the house, because it's within that parcel of land, we know that it will convey. It is appurtenant. The surveyor is the only one that can properly define and explain the legal description. That's the surveyor's job. Making sure that they, we're staying in our lane and they're doing their job. We're letting them do theirs. So there's 4 different types of legal descriptions, 4 different methods that surveyors can use to identify the property. And the first method is referred to as meets and bounds. And this is the primary legal description used in the original 13 colonies, and that does include North Carolina. So our number 1 method for identifying the legal description is meets and bounds. Now, meets and bounds uses a starting point known as the point of beginning. And meets and bounds uses meets and bounds, distance and directions. Let's think of meets and bounds as calls, if you will, calls to mark the parameter of the property. Think about meets and bounds. We're taking a tour of the outline parameter of the property. What's the line? And so the meets and bounds tells us the distance and direction. So many feet southeast, for example. Monuments tell the surveyor when to turn. Maybe the surveyor will use natural monuments. If there's a tree or a rock or something they can use. If there's not a natural monument, then a surveyor will use their own monument. Have you guys ever seen property where there's a stake, a wooden stake in the ground? It's got a little pink flag attached to it. That's a telltale sign that a surveyor's been there. So that's what they can use to identify the lines and use as their monuments. Look, let's see, we got a couple pictures. Page 73. 73, we have our picture there. You see the star at the corner of Jones Road and Skull Road. That's going to be your point of beginning. So what meets and bounds is going to say, it's going to go have us down Skull Road It's like about 200 feet. And then we're going to turn and we're going to go southeast down to Red Skull Creek. We're going to use Red Skull Creek to go west back to Jones Road and then back up Jones Road. So what you're looking at there is the description, the visual, starting at the point of beginning and ending at the point of beginning and taking the tour around the parameters. You guys see that paragraph above it? It starts with a tract of land located in blank blank described as follows. You guys see that? That's surveyor speak. That's surveyor language for how they can identify the tract of land. That looks pretty complicated, doesn't it? Good news. We're not in surveyor school. So it's not our job to interpret that. If your buyer looks at that or your seller looks at that and says, what's this mean? We need to get them to a surveyor. We got to stay in our lane, you guys, and we can't do things that we're not qualified or certified to do. So a surveyor is a separate licensure. They got to go to surveyor school, take a test, da 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 da. Here is another example. Again, just that point of beginning at the top left there. The meets and bounds tells us the calls. We go southeast 80 feet, hit a monument, turn, southwest, whoops, hit a monument, turn, southwest, hit a monument, turn, and then back northeast. You guys see that? And all I've done is identified the property lines. Meets and bounds. Probably the most common in North Carolina. Point of beginning, calls and directions. Questions on meets and bounds? Another method possibly used to identify property lines is referred to as the rectangular government survey system. We don't see this here. Look at this picture. Does this look like our land? Does this look like North Carolina? We got mountains and hills and water, don't we? Does this not look, if you've ever flown to Vegas, or I guess out west in general, and you look out the window of the airplane, this is kind of what you see, right? So the meets and bounds is a grid system, and it's used primarily west of the Mississippi. We typically don't do the government rectangular survey system here in North Carolina. And when we mean a grid system, we mean they use a system. It's like placing a grid on a map. We have meridians, which are our north-south lines. And we have base, which are our baselines, which are our east-west lines. Couple numbers you need to know about the rectangular government survey system. It's broken down into townships. Each township has 36 sections. Every section has 640 acres. You need to know those numbers. Looks like good candidates to flashcards, if you ask my opinion. 36 sections in a township. Each section has 640 acres. Pictures. Let's look at page 76. What we're looking at on page 76 is a township. Out west is comprised of many townships, but this is just one. You can see our 36 sections. Each section, section one, always starts at the top right. And they say when you're counting sections in a township to count like you're plowing a field. Well, I myself have never personally plowed a field, but if we look at our township, it makes sense because we start at the top right and we work left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we come down to 7 on that row, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then you come down again. So instead of going back and forth, you go down and over, down and over. It's like you're plowing a field. If we were to take section 16 in figure 4.5 and blow it up, that's what we're looking at figure 4.6. Everybody see that? So we took 16 and we blew it up. And now we're looking specifically at section 16, and you can see now all the individual property owners, property lines. Some people owe more than other within each section or sections. There is math in your book that you don't need to know. So look on page 77. You see where it says math shortcut in the margin? Cross it out. You see where it says reading a rectangular survey description? Cross it out. The math we need to know is not really math, it's a couple numbers. 36 sections in a township, 640 acres in each section. Questions on the government survey system?
So this is general. This is the government, not North Carolina specific.
Correct, because this is what we use primarily west of the Mississippi. So we're not going to see this in North Carolina. The third method to identify the legal description is reference to a recorded plat map. We see recorded plat maps in subdivisions. You're not going to find a recorded plat map in a downtown area. So when a developer creates a new subdivision, generally they have a plat map. And in North Carolina, we can use the recorded plat map if it's available. If it's not available, then we're looking at meets and bounds. If your buyer's looking at the recorded plat map and they still have questions about their property lines or their soon-to-be property lines, then we need to encourage them having a survey done, having that meets and bounds. The plat map just gives us a very general idea. A picture of the plat map is on page 78. And you can see what we're looking at on page 78, kind of looks like a cul-de-sac. And right there at the road, Deering Lane, in the top left, you have lot 1. And then it works around the cul-de-sac. 1, 2, 3, 4, come down, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 different lots. It identifies their property lines. It tells us the dimensions. And plat maps also tell us any easements. You see the dotted line? That's identifying an easement. So for example, down there at the bottom, you have, looks like an easement for public utilities. Again, if a plat map is available, it's in a subdivision, it's going to be recorded down at the county, at the Register of Deeds and the county courthouse. And in North Carolina, we can use a plat map if it's available. If it's not, or if your buyer has questions, we want to encourage the buyer to have a meets and bounds. Have a surveyor come out and identify those property lines. Questions on the recorded plat map? The fourth and final method for recording or identifying the legal description is referring to a previously recorded deed. Now, this isn't as common today. We're not doing this as much today. Deeds, it's common for deeds to have, it's common for deeds to have Exhibit A. Exhibit A might be the big, long legal description. Again, back at what you're looking at on page 73, our surveyor jargon. If we have that legal description on a recorded deed, then we might be able to use that for the next, and the next. Again, less seldom used today, less common. We kind of got lazy in our past, and you're going to find some deeds that for the legal description, that Exhibit A, it might say, for example, see previously recorded deed. We just got lazy. We didn't feel the need to type all that out. So we just said, let's just reference you to the previously recorded deed. So then you spend all that time and energy researching the previously recorded deed. And guess what its legal description says? See previously recorded deed. We were lazy for a long time. So now we're not lazy anymore. We're trying to do better, but it's still not just the most accurate. The most accurate is to have a surveyor come out and identify the property lines. Talking more about that in just 1 second. So 4 different methods: meets and bounds, government survey system, plat map, and previously recorded deed. These are all ways in which the surveyor can identify the property lines. One thing that does not help the surveyor is an informal reference to a property. And the best example of an informal reference we have is the street address. Do street names change sometimes? Does anybody live in an area where they rename some streets? When they change the street names, do they sometimes renumber them? So this is why it's informal. They're subject to change. When we're conveying property, the street address alone is not sufficient. So in other words, a sales contract is a document used to convey property, to transfer the property from one owner to the other. And when we look at our sales contract in Unit 10, we're going to see that we're put in the street address, but then we're also required to put in as much of the legal description as we can. We're going to do our research. We'll talk about all that in just 1 second. But learning as much about the property as knowing the street address alone is not sufficient. So when we're conveying property, we need more than the street address. If you're leasing or if you're entering into a listing agreement, we're not conveying. So let's talk about this survey. Again, surveys can only be performed, interpreted by a licensed surveyor. It's a separate licensure. Surveys not only identify property boundaries and locations of buildings and improvements, the size of the lot, the legal access from the road, but they also help a buyer identify things such as easements. Where's your public utility easements? Encroachments. Encroachments are the only way, or survey is the only way to identify an encroachment. If there's any issues with title insurance, it can be identified by a survey. We're going to talk about title insurance in Unit 5. So hang on to that for just a second. And then if there's any flood zones, if the property's in a flood zone, it could be subject to flooding. If it's in a flood zone, then the lender may require flood insurance. I got a whole unit dedicated to insurance. So we're going to talk about homeowners insurance and flood insurance in Unit 13. So let's talk a little bit more about this survey and what they're identifying. I think one of the biggest things to understand is the survey is the only method to properly identify an encroachment. You may be able to think you can eyeball it and say, well, clearly that's on your property, and your neighbor says, no, that's on mine, and now we have a conflict. So how do we resolve it? We get a survey done so the surveyor can identify the property lines and who's on what. Encroachments are very common. And let's talk about a scenario. What if a buyer, we go under contract and a buyer chooses not to have a survey done? It's not required. They don't have to have it done. Some buyers may think they're saving money, so they choose not to have a survey done. Probably one of the #1 encroachments that we find, I mean, there's a lot, but probably the most common one is the fence. You cannot look at a fence and identify somebody's property lines. The only thing you know when you look at a fence You look at a fence and you know one thing and one thing only. You look at a fence and you know somebody put a fence there. You don't know if that's their property line. You don't know if they had it surveyed before they put the fence down. You don't know if it's encroaching. You have no idea. All you know is, somebody put a fence there. That's the only thing you know. So let's say your buyer goes under contract, the fence is an encroachment. We don't know that. If they choose to decline the survey. Property closes. Deed changes hands. The buyer's now the new owner. The thing with the fence, the encroachment with the fence comes up. Title insurance, again, that we'll talk about more in the next unit. Title insurance is meant to protect the owner from errors of the past. Things that affect the title that they didn't do. Things that were affected before they took title. If the buyer fails to have a survey done, and then later the fence is an issue because it's an encroachment, title insurance may not cover that. They may not protect that. Title insurance may say, look, had you had a survey done when you were thinking about buying, we could have gotten this resolved, we could have gotten it taken care of, and it wouldn't be an issue. You wouldn't have bought with this encroachment. I can't tell you guys how many times I've been showing property and I've been with the buyer out back in the backyard. And I've said something about getting a survey done. How many buyers have looked at me and said, Julie, do you see that fence line? That tells me where my property line is. I smile sweetly and say, well, we know somebody put a fence there, but do we know, first off, is it allowed? What if it's in an HOA? Is it even allowed? Second off, do we know that they had the survey done and they're within their property lines? I had buyers tell me once, y'all ready for this? We were talking about a survey. They said, Julie, do you see the mow line? That's going to be my property line. Come on. We could have a 14-year-old down the street mow, couldn't we? You think that 14-year-old studied the survey and properly knows the property lines? No. The only way, you may think you know, and your buyers know, but the only way you can properly identify those property lines and whether or not we have encroachments or not is to encourage a survey. Again, more on title insurance in just a minute. But we always want to encourage our buyers. Part of our due diligence when we get our buyers under contract, it's telling them the importance of the survey, identify your lines. And again, if we find any encroachments, the seller will be required to clear those up before they convey the property. So I mentioned that little flag. This is our surveyor telltale sign there. You know, a surveyor's been there. That's their trademark. That's what they leave behind. Let's see, what if the house was actually built on someone's land? It's been there for years, encroachment through forced sales. Well, now we either need to get them to clear it up or we create an easement. These are our only options to cure an encroachment. You either take care of it or you create an easement. So when it comes to surveys, what do we need to know? Where do we stand? When it comes to surveys, we cannot offer an opinion. That's the surveyor's job. We can encourage our buyer to get a survey. But if they say, what does this mean? We can't try to help. Our help is to encourage them to talk to the surveyor. They are the licensed professional in that case. Also, as brokers, because we're not surveyors, we can't write legal descriptions. That funny verbiage we just saw back on page 73. And we can't interpret them. Again, that's a surveyor's job. My neighbor connected his fence to mine. So does that mean I would have to get them to remove that if it became an issue? Yes. Either we take the encroachment down, we remove the encroachment, or we create an easement. Those are your choices. If you go to sell, you're trying to sell a property that's not marketable if you have an encroachment. And if the buyer discovers that, they're going to make you take care of it. Do you want to buy something that's been encroached? Do you want to buy something that somebody else encroached? No, we want this cleared up, right? So could it become an issue? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a surveyor, I'm not a judge, but if you have an encroachment, do you have an issue that we need to deal with? Yep. That's the meat of Unit 4. It's real short, sweet, and to the point. The rest of it is math, which again, I'm not doing today. We'll do this first thing on Tuesday. Do you have any questions on our legal descriptions, our survey? Okay, there's a number you guys need to know to prepare you for the math on Tuesday. I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Ooh. Your homework assignment is to memorize a number. Don't do any of the math questions in Unit 4 quiz. You're welcome to, but if you also want to wait until we do it on Tuesday, so after we cover it in class, that's up to you. Either you do it now or you wait till we talk about it. Y'all ready for the number? I need everybody to know on Tuesday. I need everybody to know it. Everybody ready? Am I building suspense? Here we go. Very important number. And we're going to build on this. This is the math that we're going to start with on Tuesday. I'm going to ask you guys when we log on Tuesday, how many square feet are in 1 acre? And I need all of you to say there are 43,560 square feet in 1 acre. How many square feet are in an acre? 43,560. Y'all want a cute trick to remember this number? 4 little old ladies driving 35 and a 60. Have we been behind them before? 4 little old ladies laying on your horn. I hear you. 4 little old ladies driving 35 and a 60. I don't care how you memorize this number, but this is the number that we're going to use on Tuesday when we come together and start building this math. I'm going to stop sharing just for 1 second, so bear with me while I'm skipping ahead and my PowerPoints here. Do I have any questions on what we've covered so far in Unit 5? No, Unit 4, sorry, Unit 4. No, and we will pick that math up on Tuesday. Questions? All right. Putting that behind us for now. Here we go into Unit 5. Unit 5 is our transfer to title. I kind of refer to Unit 5 as our attorney's unit because we're going to talk about a lot of things that they're looking at and responsible for. So in Unit 5, we're going to talk about the different methods of transferring title. We're going to talk about the deed and the important elements of a deed. There are some things that are essential, meaning they're required. The other things that are common, but not required. And also in North Carolina, we have a couple different types of deeds. So we're going to talk about those different types of deeds. We're going to talk about title examination, the importance of recording. We're going to talk about title insurance. And then the last piece of Unit 5, we're going to talk about excise tax. So before we jump into Unit 5, I want you guys to please turn with me to page 86. And there's a great chart in page 86 that kind of introduces us to the various parties. I would dog-ear this page because we're going to refer back to this. You may want to take a picture of it in a minute so you have it on your phone as a good reference. But depending on who the parties are, first off, depends on the type of document. One party is giving the document, another party is receiving the document. You guys see that? I want you to do me a favor. Over or around the word giver, I want you to write a big OR. And around the word receiver, I want you to write a big EE. This will probably be the last time you hear me refer to as giver and receiver. Going forward, you're going to hear me say give or and receive E. The OR is the give or of the document. The EE is the receiving. So for example, we're going to start talking about the deed. The grantor is the giver of the deed, also known as the seller. The grantee is the receiving of the deed, also known as the buyer. I'm telling you guys right now, it is way too easy on your test to give you buyer and seller. So what are you going to see? Grantor and grantee. We need to know that OR and EE. We'll talk about the offer, counter offer, mortgage, option, installment contract, a lot of more of these. But again, introducing you to the idea of the giver and the receiving, depending on the type of document. Everybody see that? We got our ORs and EEs. Okay. So Unit 5 talks about title and it talks about deed. So let's first making sure we understand the difference. Title is the idea of ownership. It's the right to ownership. The deed is the documentary proof. The deed is the tangible piece of paper that we can wrap around that idea. So the title is the idea. How do you prove you're the owner? You have the deed. You have the tangible proof that you can touch. Title is the idea. Deed is the proof. Title represents an owner's legal bundle of rights, that deep C we talked about in Unit 2. Title is what protects the owner from other parties. As the owner of the property, you're the owner of record. You are the one that is entitled to that deed. So there's a couple different methods that can be used to transfer title from one owner to the other. And the first method of transferring title is voluntary. You have chosen to separate yourself from the property. Alienation means separation. So if you voluntarily alienate yourself from your deed, you've chosen to sell it or gift it. You've chosen to give it away. And voluntary alienation is done so with the deed. You hand that piece of paper over to somebody else. So let's talk about this deed and what this thing is. Please look with me in the top of page 87. We're getting ready to talk about some essential elements of a valid deed. But before we look at these, I need to take just a step back and explain a few things going on here. First off, anytime we talk about the validity of a document, in this case, the validity of a deed, what we're referring to is, how is the judge going to interpret this? How is the judge going to determine if it's valid or not? What are the things that the judge is looking for? And when the judge is trying to determine the validity of a document, the judge is looking for some essential elements. I also like to refer essential elements to required ingredients. Let's say, for example, has anybody ever baked a cake? Anybody ever baked a cake? Have you ever eaten a cake? We're familiar with cake, yes? Okay. Aren't there required ingredients that go into cake? Like you just have to have certain things, right? You have to have flour and an oil and egg and water, whatever. Those are the required ingredients. If you don't put flour in, you don't have a cake, right? You got like goo, but you don't have cake. So when we talk about these essential elements, we're looking at the required ingredients that the judge is looking for to determine if this document is valid. Will it stand up in a court of law? So the top of page 87, we have the list of what the judge is looking for in a deed to determine its validity. The judge needs to see it in writing. We got to have legal capacity of the grantor. Who's the grantor? Don't you say seller. Who's the grantor? The giver of the document. The or is the giver. Yes, it's the seller. Way too easy to say buyer and seller, you guys. The deed has to have the name of the parties, grantor and grantee. It's got to have words of conveyance. There's got to be some sort of verbiage in the deed that the grantor is conveying the property to the grantee. Some sort of verbiage that we know this was voluntary alienation. There's our legal description. The grantor signs the deed. And then the grantee has to voluntarily accept it. They have to voluntarily take the deed. So the grantor signs it and the grantee accepts it. These are the things that the judge is looking for. If you have a question with the validity of your deed and you take it to the judge and you say, Judge, is this a valid deed? The judge is going to look for these required ingredients. They're going to look for these essential elements. If they're present, the judge will tell you your deed is valid. If they're not, then your deed is not valid. All right, let's talk about cake again. Do we like to add stuff to our cake? Who likes icing? Sprinkles, whipped cream, ice cream, nuts, cherry, what? You like stuff on your cake, right? Those are above and beyond. Do they enhance the cake? Do they make the cake better? Well, yeah. Are they required to have cake? No, they're above and beyond. So same thing with the deed. We have our required ingredients, but if you look over to page 88, we have a list of things that are not required. Page 88 is our sprinkles, our icing, our whipped cream, whatever you like on your cake. These are things that are commonly found, things that we see often. But again, when the judge is trying to determine the validity, the judge is not looking for these things. They are looking for the things back on page 87. So let's talk about the icing and the sprinkles. Deeds don't have to be witnessed. They can be, and they sometimes are, but they don't have to be in order to be valid. Deeds don't have to be dated to be valid. I mean, isn't that just helpful? So oftentimes they are, but it's not a required ingredient. Deeds don't have to have a statement as to the exact amount of consideration. Very rarely are you going to see the purchase price on the deed. There's some form of consideration, but very rarely do you see the actual amount spent. Deeds don't have to be notarized. They can be, and sometimes they are, but it's not required when the judge is determining the validity of a deed. Deeds don't have to be recorded to be valid. That bullet point's probably the biggest problem topic of this list. Yes, our deeds are recorded. Absolutely they are. We're going to talk about recording and what we record and why in just 1 minute. And deeds are recorded, but understand, it's not recording that makes a deed valid. If the judge has determined the validity, they don't care if it's recorded or not. There's something called the Connor Act that steps in and requires the deed to be recorded. Recording does not make or break the validity of a deed. The Connor Act, and we're going to talk more about the Connor Act in just 1 second. And then deeds don't have to be sealed. Sometimes if you had a notary that's sealed and they used like that big embossing stamp and it raised the paper up a little bit, puts that seal on it, you know what I'm talking about? That's not required. Again, it can be, but it's not required. So let's just make sure. My recommendation, you guys, after class, my recommendation is take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. And on the left-hand side, write out the things that are essential elements on page 87. And on the right-hand side, write down the things that are the added ingredients, the non-essential elements, often there, but not required. That way we can see a nice side-by-side of what's essential and what's not. Again, the validity of a deed, we're saying, how does the judge interpret it? Everything else is just added. Does everybody want cake now, right here at lunchtime? Sorry about that. Cake for lunch. Sounds good. Questions on our essential element of a valid deed? So now we're going to talk about a couple different types of deeds. We have several different types of deeds and purposes. First one, the most common one, the one that we see most often in day-to-day real estate practice, is the general warranty deed. This is the best deed for the grantee. Who's the grantee? The receivee of the deed, also known as the buyer. Why is it the best for the grantee? Because it gives the grantor the greatest degree of liability. It protects the grantee from the grantor. What the general warranty deed does, it gives the grantor, it legally binds the grantor to certain warranties or covenants offered by the deed. And one thing to understand with the general warranty deed before we look at those warranties or covenants, when the grantor gives the grantee a general warranty deed, they're not just saying, I promise this deed is free of warranties or free of encumbrances during the time I owned it. The grantor is saying, I promise you this is a good deed, not just from when I owned it, but the owner before me and the owner before that and the owner before that. The general warranty deed, the grantor is promising the marketability of the deed back to the beginning of time. That's a heck of a promise to make, isn't it? You know the person that owned the house before you? Probably not. Before them, and so on and so on. So it's a big promise that grantor is given the grantee. I'm telling you, nothing's wrong with this deed, not just when I owned it, but back to the beginning of time. So what are these warranties? What are these covenants that the grantor is offering the grantee? Page 89. The grantor is offering a covenant of cession, saying that they are the legal owner of record. I am the one that has the right to convey this property. Nobody else has right, just me. I am the legal owner of record and I have the right to convey. Yeah, sorry. There is a warranty against encumbrances. Is anything found during the contract to closing process? And the attorney, when they find encumbrances, when they find liens, for example, when the surveyor finds an encroachment, the seller's promise to the buyer is, I'll take care of it. I'm going to pay off all my liens before I give you my deed. Remember our lien priority? All those people standing in line with their hands out. I'm going to pay all those people off before I give you my property. If there's an encroachment, I'll take care of it. The grantor is offering the grantee the covenant of quiet enjoyment. The grantor is telling the grantee that their title will be good against third parties. You don't have to worry about interference or noise from an outside third party. I've told you you have the right to convey it. You don't have to worry about third parties. Covenant of further insurance. If anything does come up after the fact, after I hand you my deed, if you find an issue, I'll take care of it. I will come back and I will take care of it. Fix any errors of the past. And then the covenant of warranty forever. Again, if the title ever falls in the future, fails in the future, if the deed fails in the future, I'll compensate you. So what if? I hear you. Do people lie sometimes? Unfortunately, yes. What if the seller lies? We're going to talk about the attorney's responsibility in just a second. The attorney is a really good person to make sure that the seller's honest, to make sure what the seller's telling us is true, so you know you're getting that deed. Again, we'll talk about the attorney's deals and their responsibility in just 1 minute. But if something happens, you know, you purchase a property and the seller hands you their general warranty deed with all these covenants. I promise this won't happen. Errors of the past. I'm telling you right now, there's no noise from outside third parties. I'm promising you all these. And with that promise, if something ever fails in the future, that's where your buyer, now known as your new owner, has title insurance. Because if something fails, if the seller lies, or if something gets past us at closing, the new owner will have title, hopefully have title insurance to protect them from errors of the past. So all the grantor can do is say, here's my general warranty deed. I give you all these promises, and we can have an attorney verify and research. But at the end of the day, you guys, stuff still gets by. Things still happen. We'll talk about some examples in just a second. But bottom line, the owner is going to have protection from all those what ifs. Are there a whole bunch of what ifs in life? My goodness, we could spend all day down the what if trail, couldn't we? All the possibilities. And the best thing we have to offer that new owner is that title insurance for the what ifs. What if something wasn't discovered? What if something wasn't cleared? What if? And again, we'll get into title insurance in just 1 second. So the general warranty deed is best for the grantee because the grantor is providing all these warranties. They're providing all these promises. And again, this isn't just during the time that I own the property. It's the owner before me, the owner before them. It's back to the beginning of time or so.
So
Questions on, yeah.
sorry. So the does that mean that the title insurance company would reach out to the previous owner of the
That's it.
property?
That's it. That's exactly it. Because they promised this wasn't going to happen. They promised we wouldn't be here. And now we are. So who's the title insurance going to call first? They're going to call that person that made them that promise. They're going to go back to the grantor.
And what if it's like someone who, like, maybe it wasn't that first previous owner, but like the second previous owner, if they're still alive, they would be required if they went through a warranty deed?
Well, no, because the seller promised that nothing can affect this deed from me, or so I'm making you a promise from in the past too. So if this seller can't clear this up, if the grantor can't take care of this, maybe they're dead, maybe they're broke, maybe they're MIA, then title insurance will help the new owner. Think about what insurance is. Doesn't insurance protect you when something bad happens?
Yeah.
So as long as we don't have an issue with the title, we have no need for insurance, right? Now, they're not going to go back to previous owners and previous, because that's part of your promise. When you handed me the general warranty deed, you told me you're accounting for the previous owners, the owners before that, the owners before that. So if something comes up, they're coming after you. And if he can't or won't, I don't know how far they're going to go, but if they can or won't, the new owner's protected. That's the important thing to understand about title insurance. It's protecting the new owner from errors of the past.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's go ahead and take our break. We do have more, we'll definitely talk more about title insurance. That's something I want to make sure we understand. So let's take 10. When we come back, we'll talk about a couple other different types of deeds and a few other things before we get to title insurance. So let's take 10. We're back for the last hour. Welcome back. What's going on? All right, so let me take attendance. Oh, me, I got you. You are in. All right, so talking about the different types of deeds. The first type of deed was that general warranty deed. Again, this is what we see the most often. This is the most common. This offers the grantor the greatest liability because it offers the most protection for the grantee. Another type of deed that we may come across is a special warranty deed. These offer some warranties, but not as many. The other thing about the special warranty deed, you're warranting the deed only during the time you owned it. So you're not going back to the previous owner and the owner before that, and the owner before that, and the owner before that. You're offering these two warranties. And what you're telling is that at some point in the past, I received the deed, the grantor received the title. And while I owned it, nothing happened. Nothing was encumbered, nothing affected it. I'm not telling you about the owner before me or before them or so on. In North Carolina, where we typically see special warranty deeds, or anywhere, really not specific to North Carolina, are with foreclosures. So if the bank has to take the property, maybe the borrower stops making payments, they default, and the bank has to take the property, the bank will sell the property using a special warranty deed. I'm only going to make promises during the time that I owned it. We're going to talk all about foreclosure when we get to units 14 and 15, our financing units. Another type of deed that we may see is called the bargain and sale deed. What do you guys think of with the bargain and sale bin in the back of the store? That's a great place to be, I know, but we don't have the high notch, the top end stuff there, right? That's the stuff that nobody wants back in the bargain and sale bin. Same thing with the bargain and sale deed. Some states may use it. In North Carolina, we use something called a quit claim deed instead. We'll talk about that next. The thing to know about the bargain and sale deed, there are no express warranties. Remember what we said express means? Express means that the terms have been clearly stated. So with a bargain and sale deed, there are no express warranties. You may have implied warranties, but there are no express warranties. Similar to the quitclaim deed, which is what we use in North Carolina. With a quitclaim deed, there are no warranties, neither express or implied. No warranties whatsoever. Quitclaim deed pretty much says, what I got, you get. So if I got nothing, what you getting? Absolutely nothing. Quitclaim deeds can be used maybe as a correction. Maybe there was a typo. Somebody's name was misspelled. The property address is wrong. We could use a quitclaim deed to release a deed. So back to the scenario we were talking about last week where you own property and then you get married. You may want to use a quitclaim deed to convey property from me to us. What if you're going through a divorce and the divorce decree allows the property to one of the spouses? They would use a quitclaim deed from us to me. Quitclaim deeds can also be used to create or terminate an easement. So no warranties. If there's a defect or an error in the deed, that's referred to as a cloud on title. So if your name was misspelled, if the property address is wrong, some kind of defect, that's referred to as a cloud on title, and the quitclaim deed can help cure that cloud. Pages 90 and 91 list several other special purpose deeds. We're not going to go through all of them, just pulling a couple out. Again, 90 and 91. The correction deed, again, if we find an error, are we going to use a correction deed or a quitclaim deed? Well, that depends on the judge or the attorney, whatever deed they choose to use, but they both do the same thing, fix a misspelled name or an incorrect address. The trustee's deed can be used if you have a trustee managing the property on behalf of the grantor for the beneficiary. Remember, we talked about trusts and estates at the end of unit 2. So if the trustee is going to receive the title, they may receive it by a trustee's deed so they can manage it on behalf of the grantor. If you also have a trustee named in a will, for example, they may receive that property using a trustee's deed. A sheriff's deed is used if the court takes the property for any reason. So if the judge takes the property, they're going to issue a sheriff's deed. I always remember it this way, because if the judge is going to take the property, the judge themselves isn't going to go knock on the door and say, you got to get out of the property, are they? The judge is going to send who? They're going to send the sheriff. They're going to let the sheriff do the hard work. So if the court order takes the property, they'll use a sheriff's deed. And then deed of gift, if you want to give your property, maybe to your adult children, parents, your pre-licensing instructor, makes no difference. You would use a deed of gift. Consideration on the deed of gift might say something about for love and affection. You're not going to have a dollar amount, but you need some sort of consideration for love and affection. Again, several others on there. Just take a look at those. Deed of release, that's what we get up and go to work for every day. Once you make that final payment to the lender, the lender's interest is out. They file a deed of release, releasing themselves from the deed, and that shows everybody with the future interest that you are paid in full. So voluntary alienation. You have chosen to separate yourself from the property. Another method of transferring title is involuntary alienation. The court has decided to separate you from your property. You didn't voluntarily choose this. The court chose it for you. There's a nice figure in our book on page 92. Kind of helps put it all together for us. I like pictures and figures and graphs. I hope you guys are looking at that when you're looking at their books, kind of helps summarize it all for us. So we have a couple different methods of involuntary alienation. The first method is escheat. Escheat is the process when the state can take the property when an individual dies without a will or heirs. If you die escheat, you die no will, no heirs. And if the individual passes away escheat, no will, no heirs, the court, the state will take the property and do with it what they need to. Escheat, no will, no heirs. Another involuntary alienation method, the court can take the property. I know we've all heard of this one. Eminent domain. We watch the news. You don't have to watch the news long to see a story about this pop up, do you? People generally don't like eminent domain, do they? At least those that they interview on the news. So with eminent domain, the government, even though it's mine and I may owe it fee simple absolute, the government through eminent domain has the right to take my property as long as they can justify using it for public good. Maybe they'll take the whole entire property. Maybe they'll just take some of the road frontage to widen the 2-lane road to a 4-lane road. They're not taking the whole property. They're just taking a portion of it. Condemnation is the process of taking the property by eminent domain? And if they're taking the whole property and it's leased, there's a tenant in place, that will terminate the lease. The government's not going to wait for the lease to run out. So if they take your property from eminent domain, they're going to offer the property owner just compensation. So they're going to send their tax assessors out there and they're going to determine a fair market value. They're going to offer you money for the property that they take, just compensation. Again, if they're taking the whole property or if they're taking a portion of it. Questions come in all the time. Can I fight this? Can I challenge this? Can I? I don't know. You need to call your attorney. I don't know what kind of leg you have to stand on. I don't know what kind of battle you have. The reason we say just compensation though, let's say they decide to widen the road in front of your house. You have a 2-lane road now. Let's say they decide to make it a 3-lane road or a 4-lane road. And they have to take some of your property to widen that road. They will pay you for the property that they take. They will pay you for the land that they take. But what's not always taken into consideration is the loss of value of your property, because now the house is that much closer to what's now a 4-lane road. Used to be a quiet 2-lane road. Now they took your road, they made it 4 lanes. It's going to be busier and your house is that much closer. That's what they can't offer, or they don't offer you compensation for. They will only offer compensation for what they actually take. Do you think it could hurt your value if they turn that 2-lane to a 4-lane? Yeah, because we have kids and pets and all sorts of things that like to run out in the street, right? So absolutely it could hurt the value. And that's where people generally don't like eminent domain, is that just compensation.
And aren't they gonna have to also charge you for the special assessment?
Possibly, if they're doing a sidewalk. Talk about adding insult to injury, right, Joyce? So now I'm going to take your land, but I'll pay you for it, but I'm going to turn around and give you a special assessment. It depends. They could, absolutely. We know the government, right? Pretty much going to do what they want when they want, yes? That includes my fee simple absolute landowners. If they want your property for public good, eminent domain says they can take it. Anybody live in High Point? No High Pointers? Familiar with High Point? HPU's taking over our city, aren't they? I'm not saying they get eminent domain, but I'm saying every time you drive around that area, that's another house that's for High Point University. So you don't have to worry about that. Nice. Another method we could lose our property, involuntary alienation, is our foreclosure. Again, if you fail to make payments, your monthly mortgage payments to the lender, after X amount of missed payments, the lender can start the foreclosure process. That X amount is subjective. Everybody's different. All lenders are different. So there is no one. But if you mix X amount of payments, again, we're going to talk all about foreclosure, our financing units, and units 14 and 15. And then the last method of involuntary alienation is adverse possession. You guys remember back in unit 3, we talked about easement by prescription. And easement is permission to be there. So easement by prescription says if somebody's been using your land for 20 years, they could come claim an easement, request an easement by prescription and get permission to use your property. Well, now let's take that a step further. Somebody's been using your property for 20 years, and instead of requesting an easement to get permission to use the property, they're going for it. And they're going for it in what's referred to as adverse possession. There's a claimant that believes that the land is theirs for whatever reason. They believe that the land is theirs. They go to the court. If the court rules in favor of the claimant, the owner could lose title. They could lose their property. May it be all the property, or maybe it's just that corner of the fence that's been there for the last 20 years. They may not take your whole property, but they might take a portion of your property depending on what the issue is. To make a claim, the claimant has to have reason to believe that the land is theirs. Maybe there's some kind of faulty document out there. Maybe their daddy and their daddy's daddy and their daddy's daddy's daddy told them that it was our land. They have some reason to believe it's theirs, and that's why they're there. That's why they're using it. So the time period to claim adverse possession, typically it's 20 years. But if the claimant can produce some kind of faulty document, referred to a color of title. Color of title is some kind of faulty document that gives the claimant reason to believe maybe it was forged, but they have a piece of paper in their hand. If they have that piece of paper, they can claim adverse possession only after 7 years. If they don't have color of title, 20 years. And just because a claimant goes to a judge and says, yeah, I've been using this property for 20 years, give it to me, the judge still has to go through a process. And one of the processes that the judge is going to go through is they're going to ask a series of questions to the claimant. And we can remember those series of questions by remembering Ocean. The judge is going to ask the claimant, was it open? Was it well known to others? Kind of hard to hide a fence, right? It's kind of hard to hide. Was it open? Was it well known to others? Was the use continuous? You can't have a break in that 20 years or 7 years. Was it continuous, uninterrupted? The judge is going to ask the claimant if it was exclusive. In other words, you're the only one using it. There haven't been multiple claimants. There's only been one. Adverse says that the claimant actually has to claim the land. It just doesn't. Yeah, do you have a question? Adverse doesn't just say that it just happens. The claimant has to claim the land. And then notorious is saying it's well known and without permission of the owner. So now we're back to our earlier discussion. How do you get somebody off your property? Well, that's not as easy said as it is done. I once had a police officer tell me once that getting something off your property isn't as easy as what we think it is or should be. So getting somebody off your property is a different challenge, a different discussion for a different day. What I do know is if you give them permission to be there and then you deal with them, when the judge looks at them in 20 years and says, was your use notorious? Were you doing it without permission? They say, no, they gave me permission. Guess what? Now you can't lose your property to adverse possession. So if you give them permission, you can figure out another way to get them off, call your attorney. But if you give them permission, they can't claim it's done without permission. So they're going to ask the claimant, did you have permission to be there? And if they say yes, at least they can't take your property for adverse possession. Yeah, Jeff.
So how would this differ between residential and like commercial properties?
Property is property. So as far as I understand, commercial property, if it's a similar situation, if you're using a commercial property, adverse possession, and you can answer Ocean, the judge may grant you that commercial property as well. Is this mind-blowing? You could have somebody, I mean, what if you have an abandoned property? You guys ever see a house that looks like the next gust of wind is going to just knock it down? It's been abandoned. It's been sitting there for so long. Well, where is that person? I mean, we don't know. But as long as they're paying their taxes every year, county doesn't care about them, do they? Because they're getting that check every year. What if they moved out of state? What if they moved out of state and they're back in Texas and they never come check on it? They don't see that somebody's moved their trailer on the land. All right, we need to watch our mute button. We good? Okay. I think we get some accidental unmutes. So yeah, you lose that, or that portion of the property with the fence or the whole property. Again, somebody's been using it. At some point, they have the right to think that it's theirs, because my goodness, I've been using it for the last 20 years. Let me just go get it. And that's what's happening with adverse possession. So easement by prescription, you're asking for permission to use the property. Adverse possession, you're taking it a step further and now you want the property. If the judge is going to grant adverse possession, they're probably going to do an action to quiet title. This is just the legal process to resolve any title disputes. So action to quiet title is just to resolve any kind of conflict, the legal process, and that conflict absolutely would include adverse possession. So let's look at an example together. Adverse possession. A broker is contacted by a prospective client that wants to sell 5 acres of land. The client explains that while they have no deed to the property, they have farmed the land for over 25 years without any objection from the owner of record. While we may have a potential adverse possession, the client must first prove to the court that they have met all the requirements to obtain title by adverse possession. In this case, if you got that call, what we need to do is advise that party to talk to their attorney. I can't get involved. I cannot list this property for sale until this matter is resolved. You can't sell what's not yours. So just because you think you have rights to it, because I've been using it for 25 years, why can't I sell it? That's not our job, you guys. So when this comes up, we need to make sure that we get them to their attorney and this gets resolved to see if we can sell it, to see if it is the seller's to sell. Involuntary alienation. You don't have control about separating yourself from your property. Questions on involuntary alienation? Another method of transferring title is descent, also known as by intestate. If an individual passes away by descent, they die without a will. They have heirs. Remember, a escheat is no will, no heirs. Descent is no will. If the state can find heirs, they'll try to pass the property on. If they can't, then they will take the property escheat. So escheat is no will, no heirs. Descent or intestate succession is no will, but there are heirs. And then the last method to transferring title is with a will. So when the individual passes away, the title will convey based upon the owner's wishes as spelled out in their will. Wills can cover real property. They can cover personal property. Those actually have names. A devise is leaving real property in a will. A bequest is personal property. Don't know if you need to know that or not, but it's there just in case. I think we tend to use these interchangeably, a devise and a bequest. Questions on the different methods of transferring title. 4, voluntary, involuntary, by descent, and by will.
I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
Or by descent, what would North Carolina consider like heirs?
That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. How far back are they going to go? You ask, and yeah, and that's a great question that I don't know the answer to that.
Or just even who would be like would it just be direct descendants or like, cousins or
Right? How far back they go. I've heard once that how far back they go may depend on the valuability of the value of the property. If it's value, they may not look as hard, but if it's worthless, they may dig a little deeper. I don't know the answer to that, Joe. But I'm sure they have some kind of, I know they have some kind of process and what counts as an heir. Because like you said, you could go back to like second cousins, right? So how far back do we go? And I don't have answers to that. The moral of the story, you guys, get a will. It's easier
So-
for your loved ones. Yeah.
if somebody so say that there's no heir and no will, but someone is related to them, is there a process like through attorneys into the court that you could like argue that point?
Probably you could contest a will. So I imagine you could contest if you found out that your brother or whatever lost property, you probably could contest that, but that's a call your attorney.
Okay.
Yep. Anything else? Okay, so switching gears just a bit, we're on page 95. We're going to talk about title a little bit more. So quick reminder, way back to the beginning of this unit, title and deed are pretty much the same thing. I'm saying the same thing, just two different ways. Title is the right to ownership. Title is the right, it's the idea of ownership. The deed is the documentary evidence. The deed is the tangible proof that you are the owner. So one of the jobs of the closing attorney is to perform a very thorough public search of all documents that have been recorded that are related to and affect that property. So let me back up for a second. The buyer hires the closing attorney. When we're going to go contract to closing process, the buyer hires the closing attorney, which means the closing attorney's client is the buyer. And it is the closing attorney's responsibility to make sure that their buyer client receives clear marketable title. And one way that they can best serve their client in receiving that clear marketable title is by doing the very thorough search of the public records. Again, finding everything that can affect that title or that property, everything that might. Now, let's talk about this public record search. Who can access the public records? Yeah, the public. Do y'all know? Where are my homeowners? Do y'all know your deeds on the register of deeds, public records? I could go look your deed up this afternoon if I wanted to. Did you know that? That's a public document. If you're not a homeowner, you go look your landlord's deed up this afternoon. Write this down, but don't do it now. Every county has a GIS. Please don't do it now. I consider that a distraction. So if you live in Forsyth County, you can search Forsyth County GIS, and you can start to do a public record search. Is anybody doing it now? I know what I say, but I see you guys like, oh my gosh, I can find my deed. Yeah, write it down. Perfect. Thank you. So whatever county you live in, just Google My County GIS. Great place to start. Don't take all your study time doing it.
Are you saying GIS as in Sam or?
GIS. It stands for something. I don't remember what it stands for, not important. But this is generally a good place to start with doing the public record search. You can find the deed, you can find plat map if it's available, tax records, all sorts of stuff you can learn about your property. So if it's public records, why does the attorney have to do it? Why is this the attorney's job and the attorney's job only when all of us have access to it? Because they're doing the deep dive. They're doing the deep dive to make sure that, one, they find everything. But guys, bottom line, title insurance isn't going to release a title without an opinion from the attorney. Title insurance wants to know that a attorney has performed this public record search, that the attorney, if there's anything to be found, they have discovered and they get with the seller to clear up prior to settlement. So the whole reason we record is to give notice. By taking your deed, that documentary proof, and putting it on record, you're telling the whole world, this is mine. I am the owner of record. It's your proof. It's your documentary evidence. So the title examination that the attorney does, another thing that they're doing besides the public record search, they're making sure that the chain of title links. Let's say, and I would give me just 1 second. I got to make sure I say this right. What the attorney is looking for, they're pulling not just the current deed, but all the past deeds. They're going way back. And one thing that the attorney's looking for is that the grantor on this deed matches the grantee on the previous deed. And on the previous deed, the grantor's got to match the grantee on the previous deed. That's what we're looking for that linking conveyances. That's what we're looking for to make sure the grantor matches the grantee on the previous deed, and so on and so on. If there's a gap or a kink in the chain, if those conveyances don't link up, then that cloud on title, the attorney can request to get that cleared up. Again, they're going to get with the seller. Was it something we need to have somebody come sign? Was it something from so long ago that the attorney and the seller just need to go and stand in front of the judge and ask for a cloud on title, ask for the judge to convey or to correct that cloud on title? So the attorney's responsibility to their buyer client is to make sure that their buyer is getting that clear marketable title. And when they do that public record search, if it's not clear and it's not marketable, they're going to get it fixed before they do convey. That's what the buyer pays the attorney for, that assurance. So again, what we're looking for here is that marketable title. The seller has to be able to deliver that marketable title to the buyer. That's their biggest obligation, their biggest requirement is to deliver that marketable title. But the buyer's attorney is the only one that can determine that it's marketable or not. So yes, we could do our own public record search, but we cannot guarantee the marketability of it. That is the attorney's job. And what we're shooting for is that marketable title. Again, we find an issue, the attorney and the seller will take care of it. That's the attorney's job. Yes, ma'am.
So we use attorneys here in North Carolina who do the searches, which I know other states use a title company to do everything.
Correct.
So by doing that, is that saying that everything is free and clear and everything's basically copacetic and we're good to go? And that does the title insurance? I mean, everything's done, or do we also, I'm saying as a buyer instead of a real estate person, is that saying that I'm good, I signed documents, the property that I'm buying is good and my title is good to the house?
To the best of the attorney's knowledge.
Okay. So if
That's what the
anything's
attorney's
wrong-
promising the title insurance company. The title insurance isn't going to release that policy until the attorney says, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, so every time we buy a house or basically sell a house, either side of that, it's usually included. We don't have to ask for it in this state.
No, that's the attorney's job. Yep. They
Okay.
do that thorough record search based on their opinion. They release the title insurance company. They authorize the title insurance company to release the
Okay, so
policy.
it's not a separate step. It's actually inclusive with what they're doing. Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure, because how you
Yep.
said it almost sounded like we have to ask for that.
Nope, that's their job.
Thank you.
Buyer hires the attorney.
Okay.
Attorney's representing their client. And the best representation they can offer their client is to make sure that their client is getting clear marketable title. Yep. So again, the title search, the attorney is looking at all the public records. And they're doing that link of conveyance, that chain of conveyance to make sure everything lines up, to make sure everything connects. Depending on the situation or the title, the attorney may do an abstract of title. This is like the Cliff's Notes. It may not be, if it's reason to think that this is good title, maybe this person's owned it for like 50 years, for example. They may just do a condensed history. That's referred to as an abstract of title. And when the attorney is doing the title search, in North Carolina, we have something referred to as a Marketable Title Act. And what the Marketable Title Act says, it is that the attorney can trace it back for 30 years and they have no issues, they have no other claims, they have no reason to believe anything. The Marketable Title Act says if we could go back and say it's all good for the last 30 years, the attorney can claim it marketable. If they have an issue, if they have a flag go up, they may have to go back further than 30 years. But generally speaking, in North Carolina, we can go back 30 years and not find an issue. The attorney can claim it as marketable. I think a common question is, okay, well, what if I've owned my home for 35 years? I've been the only owner for the last 35 years. Does that mean a new buyer doesn't need to have the title search done? And the answer is they always need to have that title search done. Remember, for example, the mechanic's lien. What if you thought you paid that mechanic off, but you really didn't? Maybe you just forgot to put the check in the mail and the mechanic files a lien. You've owned the property, but that doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't encumber it. Does this make sense? So no matter how long you've owned the property, no matter how long it's been in your family, the buyer, through their closing attorney, will always do that title search. We're not going to assume that it's good because you've owned it for more than 30 years. That is the attorney's job. They do the record search, they go back at least 30 years, everything's good to go. The attorney offers their opinion of title, and based on their opinion of title is when the title insurance company is going to release their policy. Title insurance protects the current owner from errors of the past. Anything that wasn't or couldn't have been discovered. Anything that didn't come up through the attorney's job, the survey, for example, and it comes up later. This is why the current owner has title insurance, is protecting them from errors of the past. So what if you buy a house, you find out 10 years later, there was an error of the past. The previous owner did something or didn't get recorded in time or whatever. Title insurance is almost always going to go after the previous owner first, because part of the seller documents is to sign something saying this isn't going to happen. Sign something saying, I promise you, nobody can come back later. And now that they have, title insurance is going after them first. If they can't take care of it, maybe they're dead or broke or MIA, then title insurance will generally step in and take care of it for the current owner. Again, pretend that word title doesn't exist. This is just insurance. Isn't insurance there to protect you when something bad happens? We have our medical insurance, our auto insurance, our homeowner's insurance. This is just an insurance to protect your title if something bad happens. Title insurance generally has two policies. There's the owner. Yesterday they were the buyer. Today they're the owner. If a lender is involved, first off, let me say this. If a lender is involved, title insurance is required. Period. End of story. If it's a cash buyer, title insurance is highly recommended and will only have one policy because a lender's not involved. Now, most of our buyers involve a lender, which means title insurance is required. And there's two policies. The owner is going to be covered for as long as they own the property. They will be covered from errors of the past for as long as they own the property. The lender is going to be covered for as long as they have an outstanding loan. Once you pay the lender off, they no longer have an interest in the property, do they? So once you pay that lender off, their policy goes away. So again, the attorney's job is to perform the title search so they can offer their opinion of title. And based on the attorney's opinion of title is when title insurance will agree to cover the new owner. So when we go under contract, generally speaking, what happens when we go under contract? We go ahead and notify the closing attorney. We'll talk more about the contract to closing process as we go. But shortly after we go under contract, the attorney is going to perform the preliminary title search. That's the very thorough title search. Again, if they find something, they're going to get with the seller to clear up before closing. One of the last things that the attorney does, fast forward to closing, and one of the last things that the attorney does before they offer their opinion to the title insurance company, they're going to do one more quick title search to make sure nothing came up on the title from when they did the big one, right when we went under contract. So they do the big deep dive during the contract to closing process. And then right before they offer their opinion, they're going to do one more quick search just to make sure nothing else has popped up. If it does, closing will be delayed. They'll get with the seller to get it cleared up. Remember, we're trying not to convey clear marketable title. We're not going to say, well, this isn't clear marketable, so let me convey it and then I'll take care of it. The whole purpose is to convey clear marketable title, which means when I hand you my title, it's good, not a work in progress. Does this make sense? So that's why the attorney is going to do one more quick search, offer their opinion. Based on their opinion is when title insurance releases to the new owner and the deed changes hands. So let's look at a couple examples of how title insurance may or may not work. So after a title policy is issued, it is later discovered that a previous deed to the previous owner was forged and is thus void. Can an attorney discover a forged document in a public record search? All they see is the documents, but they can't attest to the signatures, can they? So there's nothing the attorney could have done about this. They found the document. There's no way that they could have known it was forged. Title insurance in this case will indemnify the buyer because the title defect existed prior to the effective date and it could not have been discoverable from that public record search. So in this case, title insurance, they may go after the previous owner. If not, if they can't or won't, then title insurance will cover the new owner. That's what they're there for. There's just, the attorney can only do so much. So title insurance is there protecting for these other things, such as the forged document. Let's look at another example. Buyer's buying a home and declines to have the survey done. They say, nah, I'm going to save some money. I'm not going to have a survey done. After closing, the buyer, the new owner, discovers that the neighbor's garage encroaches on their property by 2 feet. Guess what? The title insurance is going to say, yeah, no, I'm not touching that. Because if you would have had a survey done before closing, we would have found it and it would have been taken care of and we wouldn't have this issue. But because you decided to waive that survey, you've lost this right to be protected. Does that make sense? If it's something that could have been discovered by a survey. So again, you guys, when we're working with buyers and we have a conversation with them about the importance of the survey, the biggest reason, the biggest plus of having a survey is to offer you protection with your title insurance company. Because again, they're insurance companies, right? They're not going to pay unless they absolutely have to. Yes, they're not going to pay just because you pick up the phone and file a claim. They're going to investigate it and look into it. And if their investigation determines that you didn't have a survey done, they're not going to cover you. And that's a conversation we can have with our buyers about the importance of that survey. All that is done in our contract to closing process. That's all coming in Unit 21, so bear with me. Yes, did I have a question?
Yes, quick question. If you are buying a new property and you hire an appraiser, can the appraiser determine if there's an encroachment?
Nope.
Or that has
Nope.
to be done by a
Nope, the
surveyor?
appraisers, yep, the appraiser's only going to determine value. The surveyor is the one that determines the encroachment. The appraiser can say that might be an encroachment, but they can't say that is an encroachment. That's the surveyor's job. So we're talking about this idea of recordation and recording certain documents. So when we record something, it's the act of actually putting it in the public documents. Attorneys generally handle that. By recording a document, you're serving notice, it's serving as public notice. You're letting the world know, this is my document, this is my property, this is whatever document it is that you're recording. We're going to see in just a second that North Carolina is a pure race state, pure race. We'll see those words in just a second. Meaning in North Carolina, the first one to get to the courthouse with their document and record it is the one that wins. The first one to get there and record their document, because that's what we look at as these public records, these public documents. And another thing that the attorney does, remember all those lien holders that were standing there with their line and with their hand out, waiting for the seller to close so they can get paid? Remember all those lien holders? Remember them all standing there in a certain order, lien priority? Before the attorney can record the buyer's new deed, they have got to record the seller's lien satisfaction. They have to have a certain, make sure that everything is in a certain date and time stamp. Because if we find the liens, outstanding liens, convey the property to the buyer, and then record the lien satisfaction, it looks like the buyer paid those off, doesn't it? So we want to show that the seller paid that off while it was still theirs. So the attorney, when they record part of their process of closing, I mean, they just don't record the buyer's new deeds. Before they can do that, they have to record all the seller's lien satisfaction, saying all those people standing there with their hand out have been paid. This protects the buyer when they become the seller. So when they go to sell and we do that linking, that chain conveyance and make sure everything links up, they're showing that the sellers have been paid off before they record the buyer's new deed. So lien priority. So don't go anywhere. I'm not done yet because I do want to say a few things. So we're going to finish here for now. I don't have that much more to say in Unit 5. So you don't have but what, another page or so. We're going to talk about something called the Connor Act on page 101. And then we're going to talk about our excise tax. That's pretty much all we got left in Unit 5. So let's talk about what next week's going to look like. First off, please remember, you guys, next week we go till 2. So 9 to 2 next week. When we come together on Tuesday, we're going to go back and we're going to do the math from Unit 4. I encourage you to look ahead. Remember, though, There's more math in unit 4 than what you need to know for your test. So we'll hone in on what you need to know. Once we do the math in unit 4, we'll finish this last page and a half or so of unit 5. And then we get going on unit 6. After unit 6, we do unit 20. After unit 20 next week, we will probably, and here's our order, unit 20. We're probably going to get started on unit 7. Unit 7 is where it starts getting deep. Unit 7 introduces us to agency. I always say, you guys are going to hear me say this 12 times at least. Units 7, 8, 9, and 10 are heavily tested units. 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now, next week, we'll just get started on 7. So I encourage you guys to look ahead. Look at unit 6, look at unit 20, and start looking at unit 7, because we're going to spend a lot more time in 7 than what we have in any other unit so far.
Is 20 not heavily tested and that's why it's moved up?
It's just the order. So 7, 8, 9, and 10 are your heavily tested units. You'll get a question or two from 20. Remember, I don't go in order of the book. I go in order of the syllabus. So Tuesday, we're going to start with some math. We'll finish 5. We'll do 6. We just keep trucking right along. You guys, please let me know if I can answer any questions this weekend. I've enjoyed the introductions I've gotten from some of you. Please, if you haven't done that yet, remember to do so this weekend. It's 101. So thank you guys. Have a great weekend. Do something fun and amongst your studying. And we will see you guys on Tuesday morning. Thank you.